Lu Guang's room was much larger than those of the other survivors. It was crudely partitioned with a few tarps to block the view from outside. As soon as he reached the door, Lu Guang lifted the tarp and stepped inside. The room looked like a giant landfill, piled high with all sorts of junk, from snack bags to liquor bottles scattered everywhere. Only the latex mattress in the center was relatively clean, free from the trash, though the once white sheets had turned a grimy dark gray. At that moment, the bedsheets were slightly disheveled, and there seemed to be someone under the mattress. Lu Guang pulled back the blanket. A woman's gasp came from underneath, but she immediately fell silent, likely fearing she would anger him. Heh. Lu Guang looked at the woman lying on the bed. She was the same woman who had begged for the lives of her husband and 7-year-old son last night. The woman's name was Wang Fong. In her desperation after Lu Guang left, she had taken the initiative to come to his door, willing to sacrifice herself to ensure her family's safety. Wang Fong was in her 30s. Though thin, she had a rather curvaceous figure. Lu Guang glanced at her, gave a lecherous grin, and lunged. Over half an hour later, the battle was over. Lu Guang pulled up his pants, turned back, and said coldly to Wang Fong, "Get dressed and come out with me." With the rustle of fabric, Wang Fong stepped out of Lu Guang's room. Wang Fong's eyes were red and swollen, but she didn't dare cry in front of Lu Guang. She just lowered her head and said, "My lord, I have served you day and night. Can you spare my family now?" To her surprise, Lu Guang sneered. "What are you talking about? When did I ever say I'd spare them?" Wang Fong looked up at him, her eyes filled with disbelief and horror. "Didn't you say that as long as I cooperated and served you, you would?" Lu Guang lost his patience and snapped, "Wang Fong, stop talking nonsense. You came to my door yourself. I never promised to spare your whole family. Now come here. I beg you to spare them, big brother. I'll do anything, just take me. Don't take my son and husband. Please, remember last night." Amidst Wang Fong's screams and pleas, Lu Guang dragged her to an open clearing, the place he usually used to gather bait when hunting origin beasts. In the clearing, 2 subordinates sent by Chu Sheng were already guarding the people used as bait. "Lu Guang, why are you so late? If there's something good, why didn't you call us?" Seeing Wang Fong's unusually flushed face, the two let out lecherous laughs. Lu Guang threw Wang Fong to the ground and told the two, "Watch her closely. This is the first bait." Then he headed toward the survivors' living area. Not long after, more people were brought to the clearing. Wang Fong fell into despair when she saw Lu Guang leading her husband and son over. "No, please, my lord. My son is still small. Please spare him. I beg of you. He can't run fast. Leave him here, and my husband and I will do our best as bait." Wang Fong clung to Lu Guang's leg. Her husband also knelt, and the other commoners followed suit. Cries and pleas filled the air. Lu Guang chose people entirely based on his sick whims. He loved seeing their looks of despair and misery. Seeing Wang Fong sobbing, Lu Guang kicked her away in disgust. "Shut the hell up. Keep making noise and I'll kill you right now." Lu Guang walked away without looking back. Wang Fong was helped up by her son, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. Before the apocalypse, people used to say, "Never underestimate a mother's love for her child, and never underestimate how far a desperate woman can go." Watching Lu Guang's retreating back, something manic began to stir in Wang Fong's hollow, despairing eyes. She didn't even notice her fingernails digging deep into her palms. By noon, Chu Sheng and his gang were ready. Everyone was armed, many wearing crude beast-hide armor. A pouch emitting a strange odor hung from their waists, filled with beast excrement and urine they had collected to smear on themselves and mask their scent. Some also carried filthy backpacks containing pesticides they had happened to collect earlier. The large group left the underground garage and rushed out from the top-floor window of the building. Chu Sheng and his gang surrounded the civilians like they were guarding prisoners to prevent anyone from escaping. Once they reached a spot far from the gathering point, Chu Sheng grabbed one of the survivors. He pulled out a small knife and stabbed the thigh of the unlucky man he had chosen. "Arg!" the man screamed in agony. Chu Sheng pulled the knife out slowly and then plunged it hard into the man's other thigh, saying fiercely, "Stay here and don't move. If you do, I'll kill you instantly." Having said that, he ignored the man's weeping and pleas for mercy. Chu Sheng led his men into hiding. They couldn't go looking for high-level beasts. That would be suicide. They used the civilians to lure the beasts out. If it was a low-level beast, they would kill it directly. If it was high-level, they would use the remaining people for the next step. Elsewhere, after half a day of wandering through the city, Linsher finally made a discovery. He stood by a hole dug by the long-armed ape, using his spiritual power to search below. Quickly, at a depth of over 20 meters underground, he found a type of purple mutated plant. This plant had no fruit and looked like a vine with small, sharp thorns. It was about 4 or 5 meters long and didn't look edible. Linsher didn't have high hopes. Finding any mutated plant was good enough. He didn't expect most of them to be edible. If they were, he wouldn't have heard of people starving during the resource scarcity of his past life. Sure enough, the long-armed ape dug it up, tried a leaf, and signaled to Linsher that it wasn't edible. Linsher cautiously touched the mutated plant and found it didn't contain much energy, so he let the long-armed ape eat it. After eating the plant, the purple hue on the ape's body became slightly more pronounced. Aside from the long-armed ape, the other beasts didn't have such strong poison resistance, so only the ape could eat this kind of toxic mutated plant. Just then, Ma Wang's head suddenly snapped in one direction. What is it? Linsher noticed something unusual about Ma Wang. The wolf's sense of smell was much sharper than his. It had caught the scent of fresh blood in the air. Let's go see. Linsher turned and mounted Ma Wang, heading toward the scent. The long-armed ape and Bao Jun hurriedly followed. Ma Wang was as fast as lightning, leaving the long-armed ape and Bao Jun behind. Those following weren't fools. They knew how to track footprints and scents, so there was no need to worry about them getting lost. Linsher sat on Ma Wang's back, using his spiritual power to scan the surroundings for anything out of the ordinary. A second later, he raised an eyebrow. The scene was located in this border city, where Chu Sheng and his gang had placed their bait. Besides the man from before, 2 more corpses lay on the snow-covered ground. The man Chu Sheng had stabbed in the legs earlier was dead. All 3 corpses had over 20 wounds, mostly on their arteries, causing massive blood loss. The once white snow was now stained a brilliant, shocking red. After Chu Sheng took that man's blood, he had waited, but no origin beast appeared. Chen Weilong then suggested taking another man and woman from the survivors to use as bait. They wanted to use fresh blood to lure the high-level origin beasts they feared. However, after waiting for over half an hour, there was still no sign of any beasts. Usually, an origin beast would appear within 15 minutes, either eating the bait on the spot or dragging it away. But today, even with 3 corpses, no beast had shown up. This hadn't happened in months. They didn't know that Linsher and Ma Wang had cleared out the origin beasts in the city today, so Chu Sheng and his gang would never see another one. But they had made a big show of bringing people out. They couldn't just retreat. Only when they were sure the high-level beasts had left the city would they feel safe to continue hunting. Suddenly, a cold wind blew. From the spot where the group was hiding, a small sound rang out. This startled those who were anxiously waiting for a high-level beast. Looking up, they saw an old window creaking in the wind. In that tense and terrifying atmosphere, the woman brought out as bait couldn't take it anymore. Sob, sob. I don't want to die. I want to go home. I want to go home. The woman went frantic, struggling to escape, but she was blocked before she could even leave the circle. Her face contorted as she looked down at the fruit knife plunged into her stomach. I told you, no screaming or unnecessary movements. Chu Sheng looked at the woman viciously and twisted the knife once more. Once she collapsed, he carefully pulled the knife out to avoid getting blood on himself. Then Chu Sheng approached a man in the crowd. The man's body was trembling violently. Seeing Chu Sheng get close, he immediately fell to his knees. My lord, that woman has nothing to do with me. She was the one who wanted to run, not me. Gah! Chu Sheng didn't give him a chance to speak, ending his life with a single strike. The remaining survivors huddled together in fear, staying away from the corpses and Chu Sheng. Their eyes held nothing but despair and terror. Chu Sheng wiped the blood from his blade onto a corpse and kicked it a few times before whispering to the survivors. Anyone who dares to scream or run dies instantly. You know my rules. If one person violates them, the whole family pays. If no origin beasts show up today, you might actually make it back alive. If only a few high-level beasts show up, some of you might still live. Who lives and who dies depends on your performance. If you ruin my plan, don't blame me for being ruthless and killing you on the spot. Understood. Even though he never intended to let these people return alive, Chu Xing didn't forget to brainwash the civilians. The 36 remaining survivors were silent, not daring to utter a word. They had been warned on the way. Anyone who made a sound would die first. Not just them, but their entire family would be implicated. The survivors chosen here were all people with families. No one wanted to die first. Hearing Chu Sheng's words, a flicker of hope appeared in the dead eyes of the survivors. They all wanted to return alive. If they survived this time, it would be someone else's turn to be bait next time. Seeing the civilians obey, Chu Sheng turned to the team member beside him. Drag this bitch's body over there. Put her with the other 3 and cut a few more holes in her. Yes, Captain. 2 members immediately grabbed the woman's legs and dragged her toward the other 3 baits. The atmosphere grew even more tense. Chen Weilong kicked a concrete wall, leaving a hole. Damn it, if this keeps up, the beasts won't come, and our own people will go crazy first. Where the hell did all these high-level beasts come from? Why didn't they go somewhere else? Why here? Early yesterday morning, before heading out, Lu Guang and the others had discovered beast tracks. Chen Weilong and Zhang Sen had gone to check together. It hadn't snowed last night, so the tracks were still very clear. When Chu Sheng first saw the tracks, he concluded the owner could be a level 4 origin beast. After all, they had already experienced the threat of level 3 beasts. Level 3 and level 4 were so different. How could they be mistaken? The massive footprints were like a giant shadow looming over everyone's hearts, making it hard to breathe. Chu Sheng warned Chen Weilong with a look. At a time like this, his men had to keep their spirits up. Just as Chu Sheng turned his head, 2 terrified screams rang out. Arg! It was the 2 members who had just dragged the body. Everyone turned around and saw an unbelievable sight. Where there had only been corpses, a massive origin beast had suddenly appeared. It was black and white, and its size far exceeded level 3. Clearly, there had been nothing there a moment ago. When did it appear? More importantly, a person was sitting on top of that giant high-level beast. The 2 who had been dragging the body immediately dropped it and scrambled back through the snow like they'd seen a ghost, unable to even form a sentence. They hadn't even seen when Ma Wang appeared. Boss, that's a person. He's coming this way. The shouts around him quickly snapped Chu Sheng back to his senses. A flash of panic crossed his face, but he quickly regained his composure. A second later, greed flickered in his eyes. He had initially thought a high-level beast had entered the city, but now that he realized it was a person, their plan had to change. Dealing with a person was different from dealing with a beast. Chu Sheng, Chen Weilong, and Zhang Sen glanced at each other, their faces lit with joy. Someone could actually tame origin beasts. If they could get the secret to taming them, wouldn't they be able to get whatever they wanted in this era? Since the apocalypse began, being oppressed for so long made them subconsciously believe that people were easier to deal with than high-level beasts. They had encountered level 3 beasts, but never a level 3 evolved human. They heard that level 3 evolved humans only appeared in the regular military units of Jia City. Chu Sheng considered his own strength among civilian evolved humans to be outstanding. Seeing Lin Shi approach, Chu Sheng took the initiative to step forward toward Lin Shi and Ma Wang. The man who had been so fierce just moments ago now wore a friendly, even somewhat fawning smile. Brother, where are you from? Is there something I can help you with? Lin Shi looked down at the bearded man, whom he had seen yesterday while scanning with his spiritual power. Are you the boss around here? Lin Shi sized up Chu Sheng. At the same time, Chu Sheng was observing Lin Shi. Lin Shi was very young and had a fair complexion, so he didn't look intimidating at all. Seeing that Lin Shi was so young and didn't seem to have any intention of killing him, Chu Sheng was even more delighted. He patted his chest and said, I've lived in this city for over 30 years. Calling me the boss isn't wrong. There's nowhere here I don't know. Lin Shi nodded. The man before him was indeed the leader of the underground base he had discovered yesterday, though Chu Sheng didn't admit it directly. What are so many of you doing here? He asked. Even though he knew the answer, seeing the 3 fresh corpses, Lin Shi had already guessed their purpose. Using corpses to lure origin beasts wasn't unusual. However, Lin Shi didn't expect them to be so reckless as to use so many ordinary people as live bait. He knew full well that even if they killed all these people, they wouldn't lure any beasts, because all the origin beasts in the city were currently inside his space. Chu Sheng hesitated for a second before saying, "These people usually rely on me. I feed them. When food runs out, I use them as bait. If you find it hard to watch, little brother, then out of respect for you, I won't hunt anymore today." Chu Sheng was afraid Lin Shi was the type of kid who got a little power in the apocalypse and wanted to play hero. If he let the level 4 beast in front of him eat Lin Shi, that would be terrible luck. Hearing Chu Sheng say this, the survivors behind him felt a spark of hope. They wanted to answer for Lin Shi, to tell Chu Sheng to let them go. But Lin Shi wasn't the type to interfere in other people's business. Even if he saved them today, he couldn't stay here forever, nor could he look after them. As Chu Sheng said, living under his protection meant accepting the need for sacrifice. Lin Shi was about to decline when there was a commotion behind him. Immediately, terrified screams rang out. It turned out the long-armed ape and Bao Jun had caught up. When Chu Sheng saw the ape and Bao Jun, he immediately thought of the beast tracks he and his team had seen in the snow this morning. The wolves are all here. Chun Weilong also realized it and hurriedly said, "So it was you." They hadn't expected that the high-level beasts they were waiting for had all been tamed by the young man before them. 3 of them right here. In other words, there was another one in the shadows. Facing 3 fierce beasts this time, Chu Sheng, who had initially wanted to make friends, had to back away. Chu Sheng, Zhang San, and Chun Weilong looked at each other again, suddenly feeling the situation was difficult to handle. Just then, a girl took advantage of everyone's attention being on Lin Shi and rushed out from the circle of evolved humans. She ran to Ma Wang and knelt down. "My lord, please save us. Those men are murderers. They don't care about us at all. You must be a good person. You won't just stand by and watch us die, right?" The girl cried piteously while playing the good person card. Hearing this, a murderous glint flashed in Chu Sheng's eyes. At that moment, Chu Sheng and the other 2 didn't show any reaction in front of Lin Shi, but the girl's eyes looked at Chu Sheng as if he were a dead man. Seeing that Chu Sheng wasn't killing anyone, the survivors behind her were overjoyed and hurriedly knelt down. "My lord, please save us. We were forced to be bait. We didn't do it willingly. My lord, they're hiding a lot of food and supplies at the Wanyuan store. My lord, these people are heartless." Seeing that Chu Sheng and his gang weren't killing anyone, the survivors grew bolder. They didn't just accuse Chu Sheng of having food. They even described the appearances of the others. Hearing the survivors say this, the members of the hunting team were furious. "Damn it! You eat our food, use our things, and then expect us to protect you. What were you doing before? What do you mean forced? You were clearly starving when you came here, crying and begging us to take you in." Zhang San stepped forward and said to Lin Shi, "Little brother, don't let them fool you. They may be pitiful, but they're also hateful. They're just ordinary people. If it weren't for us, they would have died long ago. Now that our base is in trouble, it's only reasonable for them to sacrifice a little. Little brother, since you're already here, why not come over to our place for a bit? I still have quite a bit of pre-apocalypse food, plus origin beast meat and fine wine. A distinguished guest from afar? Come have a meal with us before you go. After you eat, I'll give you some gifts to take with you." Chu Sheng spoke up, offering an enticing invitation. Food, fine wine. Things that were normal before the apocalypse were now incredibly precious. Chu Sheng said this openly in front of everyone. He wasn't stupid. If Lin Shi agreed to go with him, he'd have a chance to ask about taming beasts. At the very least, he could suck up to Lin Shi. Proactively offering supplies could gain him some favor. If they just killed and robbed him, he'd have nothing left. Hearing Chu Sheng say this, even Zhang San and Chun Weilong salivated. But they didn't realize that the things so precious to them were inexhaustible in Lin Shi's space. Lin Shi said, "I'm just passing through. Settle it yourselves." He meant he wouldn't interfere. As soon as Lin Shi finished speaking, the survivors were thrown back into the abyss. Chu Sheng and his men could only sneer. Hearing Lin Shi reject the civilians, Chu Sheng inwardly considered Lin Shi to be the same kind of person as him and thought about cooperating. The girl kneeling before Ma Wang, seeing she couldn't get Lin Shi's help, began to wail. Sob, you're so powerful. How can you just watch us die? If Lin Shi left, the fate of these people, those who were just condemning Chu Sheng, wasn't hard to imagine. Even if they didn't die this time, they would certainly be chosen as bait first next time. The others also fell into despair, turning their hostility from Chu Sheng to Lin Shi. You're so strong. You could easily help us a little. This person is too selfish, too cold. He's no different from those villains. Lin Shi was about to turn away, but stopped when he heard these words. You want me to help you? Hearing Lin Shi's question, hope flickered in their eyes again. Yes, yes, yes. We beg of you. Young man, you are our hero. We are willing to serve you like beasts of burden to repay you. Serve like beasts of burden. Weren't they doing that already? It was just that Lin Shi seemed easier to talk to than Chu Sheng. Lin Shi replied indifferently. Chu Sheng and his group were startled, thinking Lin Shi would kill them for the civilians, and immediately went on guard. But Lin Shi didn't move. Instead, he continued, I'll make the call. You can leave right now. No one is stopping your freedom. Hearing this, someone immediately started to walk away. But a middle-aged man quickly reacted and pointed at Lin Shi in condemnation. You're just going to let us go like this? We have nothing. We'll starve or freeze to death. How can you be so heartless? The others immediately realized he was right. If they were just let go, they'd be dead for sure once they left the city. Previously, they stayed at Chu Sheng's base because he promised food and basic protection. They only had to act at key moments and complete tasks. At the time, they didn't know their task was to be bait for wild beasts. Now that they were being protected and benefiting from Chu Sheng, they didn't want to fulfill their obligations. They regretted it, but where could they go if they left him? Young man, since you've gone this far, why not see it through? Why not take us to a safe place? What if we run into wild beasts? I heard there's an official shelter in Nan province. Can you take us there? In our next life, we will surely repay your kindness. Yes, 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 the survivors chimed in. Lin Shi laughed. Unlike saving Tan Shuang and Wang Liang at the beginning of the apocalypse, this was the true face of survivors in the end times. If he saved them out of pity, he would just be morally manipulated by them. Because once they left Chu Sheng, these survivors basically couldn't survive in the wild. If these people had enough courage and guts to resist Chu Sheng, nearly 200 of them united could have killed Chu Sheng's 30-plus men even at the cost of their lives. They knew they'd be used as bait, but no one stood up to fight because they were afraid of death. Resistance meant dying faster, so their fate was already sealed. Chu Sheng and his men looked at the survivors with eyes full of contempt and disdain. The apocalypse was here, yet they still expected to talk their way into getting others to do all the hard work for nothing. How could there be such a good deal in this world? These people must feel it's unfair, but in the apocalypse, what is fair? Weakness is a sin. Lin Shi's voice turned cold. You have only one chance. Either leave now, or stay and do whatever you want. Keep rambling, and I'll let my battle pets have you for lunch. Hearing this, Bao Jun let out a roar, baring its sharp teeth at the survivors. The survivors immediately fell silent. One person spoke up boldly. Can we take some food with us? There's a lot of food under that mall. Give us some, and we'll leave right away. Right, give us some food. That food was ours to begin with. This blatant shamelessness made Chu Sheng and his men furious. That food was collected by Chu Sheng and his men from stores after they took over and stored in the underground parking lot. It had nothing to do with these survivors. Feeding them was only to use them as live bait. Now they wanted to leave and take food with them? How did they have the nerve to say such things? But with the threat of a level 4 beast nearby, no matter how angry Chu Sheng and his men were, they couldn't say no. Lin Shi had no obligation to help them, nor did he want to test the limits of human nature. There, no one wants to leave anymore. Then I'm going. You're on your own. In the end, only 7 people from the crowd stepped out, showing their intention to leave. The rest stayed where they were. Most of those who didn't want to leave were still hoping for a stroke of luck. No high-level beast appeared today, which meant they didn't have to be bait today. As for next time, it might not be their turn, as long as it wasn't them. What if they became evolved humans? If they left, they might not even survive the night. But living one more day was still a day, right? Lin Shi watched their reactions, not at all surprised by their choice. In short, it was still selfishness at work. Lin Shi had given them hope, but when they heard he only wanted to let them go, They didn't want to leave anymore. They weren't just ungrateful to Lin Shi for letting them go. They resented him for not helping them further, making them say things they shouldn't have. Many who were just condemning Chu Sheng and his men were now gnashing their teeth in hatred. All of these reactions were clearly captured by Lin Shi's spiritual power. He had seen too much of this in his past life. Sometimes it wasn't that he was too cruel, but that most people in the apocalypse weren't worth saving. Can we really go? Wang Fong and her family of 3 were among the 7 who left. She glanced at Lin Shi. He sat atop Ma Wang, looking so aloof that they almost didn't dare look him in the eye. Chu Sheng waved his hand. No use talking more. If you want to go, go. Don't blame me if you die out there. I'm warning you. Hearing this, Wang Fong pulled her son and husband and turned to leave. Before leaving, she turned back to look at Lu Guang. Lu Guang stood among the evolved humans, seemingly dissatisfied with Chu Sheng's decision, frowning. When his eyes met Wang Fong's, he let out a cold, sinister smile. It seemed he had no intention of letting them go. Wang Fong quickly looked away and left. She didn't even bother to leave a word of thanks for Lin Shi. She walked quickly and soon disappeared. The other 4 did the same. For them, this was a life-or-death choice in a desperate situation. Staying at the base meant their fate was uncertain. Leaving meant they only had a 10% chance of survival. If they survived, it would be due to their own abilities. They wouldn't be grateful to Lin Shi. If they died out there, they would surely resent him before they died. Why did he let us leave the base and lead to our deaths? They would think. They might even think that if they had stayed, they would have lived longer. In the apocalypse, being weak doesn't mean being good. Little brother, come back with me for a drink. Chu Sheng remained nonchalant. Even though Lin Shi had cost him 7 baits, he still wanted to see what he could get out of him. Lin Shi immediately signaled Ma Wang to turn around. No need. You'd better look out for yourselves. He knew Chu Sheng was eyeing him. He was leaving this city tomorrow and didn't plan to linger. As soon as Lin Shi finished speaking, everyone's eyes blurred, and Lin Shi and Ma Wang vanished on the spot. Bao Jun and the long-armed ape were left behind again and immediately chased after Ma Wang. That day, Lin Shi spent the whole day exploring every nook and cranny of the city. After making sure there was nothing else to gain, he rode Ma Wang back to the safe house. To his surprise, he saw the 7 survivors who had left Chu Sheng at noon in an empty room near the safe house. These people were only a few hundred meters from Lin Shi's safe house. They seemed to be planning to spend the night there. Among the 7 was a woman standing 100 meters from his safe house, seemingly having waited for him for a long time. Lin Shi immediately thought, was his rejection earlier not clear enough? These people still thought they could get something from him. Xiao Bai had been ordered by Lin Shi to guard the safe house. As long as no people or beasts caused trouble, it didn't need to interfere. The woman was within the safety perimeter, so Xiao Bai didn't attack her. Lin Shi rode Ma Wang up to the woman, his face cold and his eyes sharp with killing intent. You'd better have an explanation for why you're here. Wang Fong only felt a cold wind blow past, and then a massive black shadow appeared before her. Even though she had prepared herself, seeing Ma Wang and feeling the killing intent from Lin Shi made Wang Fong unable to stop her body from trembling. Thinking of how despicable Lu Guang was, she gritted her teeth and summoned all her courage. She said softly, "My lord, we came here by accident." They really had come here by accident. After leaving Chu Sheng's group, the 7 decided to go together. Fearing retaliation from Chu Sheng's group, they had walked all afternoon without resting. Heading toward the city border, they unexpectedly stumbled upon Lin Shi's safe house. Seeing the strange-looking safe house from afar and Xiao Bai guarding the door, the first thought in Wang Fong's mind was that this safe house must be related to Lin Shi. Xiao Bai looked no different from Ma Wang. It was still a wolf, capable of being a high-level beast guarding the city gates. Other than the Lin Shi they met at noon, they hadn't heard of anyone else. For some reason, Wang Fong flatly requested to stay here. The 7 were panicked after fleeing the base and lacked a leader, so when Wang Fong made the decision, no one objected. So they found a nearby empty room to clean up and stay in temporarily. Afterward, Wang Fong stood there waiting for Lin Shi to return. Accident. If it was an accident, then what are you doing here? Lin Shi narrowed his eyes, a dangerous glint in them. I want to. Wang Fong paused and took a deep breath. I want to serve you. No one has shown us a way to live. Wang Feng's face looked like it had been wiped clean with snow, much cleaner than before. She was quite beautiful and looked even more relieved after the disaster with Lu Guang. She must have known this was their only chance to survive. Missing it would mean certain death. After Wang Feng finished speaking, she took off her padded coat, revealing her thin frame. Lin Shi didn't expect Wang Feng to be so blunt. He glanced at her and quickly looked away. Even though he'd never had a lover, it didn't mean he wasn't a normal man. It was just that as his gene unlocking level got higher, his self-control became very strong. If I remember correctly, you have a husband and a son. Yes, I do. Wang Feng bit her lip, her eyes slightly red. If using my body can buy them peace, I am willing. I'm not interested in you, Lin Shi replied coldly. If he wanted a woman, he wouldn't have waited until now. Seeing the light fade from the woman's eyes, replaced by despair and deadness, Lin Shi was silent for a moment before saying, If you want to live, go south. Go to Jia City. There's an official shelter there. You should hurry. I've cleared out the origin beasts in Nan province once. They won't gather again in the short term. Wang Feng was stunned, then overjoyed. When Lin Shi rejected her, she had almost despaired. This information was incredibly useful to her. They hadn't gone to Jia City before because of rumors that origin beasts were swarming there. The number of beasts on the road made it a suicide mission for ordinary people, so they stayed here. She didn't doubt the truth of Lin Shi's words because he had no reason to lie to them. Tears welled up in her eyes as she knelt and kowtowed to Lin Shi. Thank you, thank you. You truly are a good person. A good person? I'm no good person. Now get lost. I don't want to see you here tomorrow. If I do, I'll kill you, Lin Shi said without looking back as he and Ma Wang headed into the safe house. No. Even though you look cold, you're different from them, Wang Feng whispered to Lin Shi's back. She wiped her tears, buttoned her coat, and ran back to where the others were. She had to quickly tell them the good news. Lin Shi used his spiritual power to watch Wang Feng walk away and heard her mutter. Different. Lin Shi's eyes lowered, and he whispered in a voice only he could hear. Maybe so. Since there were outsiders around, Lin Shi didn't go directly into the safe house. He took Xiao Bai, Ma Wang, and the others to a secluded spot and put them into his space. Then, he returned to the safe house alone. At night, the city was filled only with the howling wind. Wang Feng and the others sat in the room, huddling together to fight the cold of their first night after leaving the base. The next day, Wang Feng woke up halfway through, her whole body stiff. She tried to move her stiff limbs and then nudged the person next to her. Wang Feng's husband was nudged awake. Ugh, it's so cold. Their slight movements woke the others as well. Thud, a dull sound. Among the seven, another woman nudged the man beside her. To her surprise, the man didn't wake up. Instead, he fell to the floor. After falling, he didn't get back up. Everyone knew exactly what that meant. The woman's face turned pale, and she looked like she'd lost her soul, still in the same position she'd used to nudge him. She stared at her husband lying motionless on the floor. Wang Feng's husband hurried over to check, and then shook his head at the others. The man was dead. When they looked for a place to rest yesterday, they had chosen a cramped but enclosed room. But they had no blankets, and all seven were starving after a day's walk from the base. Perhaps due to his weak health, the man who was fine last night had become a cold corpse overnight. How is my husband? What do you mean by shaking your head? Tell me clearly. Tell me. The woman who lost her husband suddenly snapped out of it and grabbed Wang Feng's husband. Her long, untrimmed fingernails dug deep into his padded coat, causing sharp pain. Didn't we say we'd help each other after leaving that den of animals? Save my husband. Why are you just standing there? Hurry. It was as if a tightly wound string in the woman's head had snapped. She had been weak yesterday, but now she was hysterical. In this situation, a weak woman losing her only support, anyone could guess the outcome. She couldn't accept the truth. Wang Feng was also a woman and understood her pain. She stepped closer to comfort her. We'll help you from now on. We'll go to the official shelter together. Help me? How? It's all because of this low-life woman. She made us stay here. This bitch killed my husband. You bitch, give me back my husband. The woman suddenly blamed Wang Feng for everything. She was the one who decided everyone should stay here last night. She grabbed Wang Feng's throat. She used all her strength, and Wang Feng's eyes immediately bulged, She almost fainted. Wang Feng's husband quickly kicked the woman away. She still wanted to go wild, but she was held back by two others. Finally, they had to tie the hysterical woman up. "What are you doing tying me up? What did I do wrong?" This lowlife woman insisted on staying here. "That's why my husband died. Don't think I don't know. She stayed here just to serve that monster riding guy. That guy deserves to die too. It's his fault we had to run. None of you are good people. I curse you all. I hope you all die miserable deaths." Vicious words kept pouring from the woman's mouth. Picking up a small ball her son was playing with in the room, Wang Feng stuffed it into the woman's mouth, and the scene finally became quiet. "What do we do with her?" another woman in the group asked, trembling. The woman who lost her husband had clearly gone mad. In these times, losing all hope really could drive a person insane. Wang Feng rubbed her throat, which was still burning with pain. "Leave her here to fend for herself." After the events of the past 2 days, Wang Feng had completely changed. She was no longer weak. Her whole being radiated courage and resilience. MMPH, MMPH. The mad woman's eyes widened. "Let's go. That lord said he didn't want to see us here today. If he does, he'll kill us." Wang Feng remembered Lin Shi's warning from last night and urged them. She went to the window, grabbed a handful of snow to wash her face, then grabbed another handful and put it in her mouth. She chewed for a long time before swallowing, her whole body shivering uncontrollably. The group of 7, now leaving the mad woman behind, was down to 5. As they left the shelter, one man hesitated. "Are we really going to Jia City? I heard the road is full of monsters. Could that guy be lying to us? If he wanted to kill us, why would he lie?" Wang Feng's eyes were firm. Even though she couldn't see Lin Shi, she still looked in his direction. "Anyway, my family is going to Jia City. You can choose to come or not." Wang Feng didn't know that Lin Shi was doing his morning exercises, his spiritual power covering the entire area. He had been watching them since they woke up. In the end, the other couple decided to follow Wang Feng's family. But they hadn't gone far before they stopped. Wang Feng, who was acting so resilient, turned pale. Because as they were about to leave, several armed men blocked their path. The leader was none other than the treacherous Lu Guang, who wanted to kill Wang Feng's family. "You bitches, I finally found you." Lu Guang's eyes were vicious, like a wolf staring at Wang Feng. "I only intended to take a few brothers out to try our luck. I didn't expect to be so lucky. You really were planning to go to the shelter, heading this way, huh? Brother Lu, you're brilliant." Brother Lu is so wise, he calculated everything. His subordinates flattered him. Though they were all level 1 evolved humans, Lu Guang was much closer to Chu Sheng than the others. When Lu Guang went back last night, the more he thought about it, the more unreconciled he felt. Lu Guang had a sick hobby. He loved seeing the people he oppressed and trampled on die in despair. To Lu Guang, Wang Feng's family escaping was like a fish he'd carefully raised to eat at its best, only for it to run away just as he was about to slaughter it. This left him feeling like he had a lump in his throat. He couldn't even enjoy sleeping with other women. So he led his subordinates to hunt them down, heading exactly where he guessed they'd be, and sure enough, he intercepted Wang Feng. Wang Feng looked around in despair. They had fled all this way, yet Lu Guang still found them. Why was fate so unfair to her? Wang Feng's husband tried to stay calm and said, "Captain Chu agreed to let us go. You're all Captain Chu's men. Why are you stopping us?" Lu Guang let out a contemptuous sneer. "Right, the captain let you go yesterday. But who told you to get caught by me? Whether to let you go now is up to me." "What do you want from us to let us go?" another man asked in a trembling voice. "You want me to let you go? You two women, take off your clothes right now and serve us until we're satisfied. Then we'll let you go. How about that?" Lu Guang pointed a fire axe at Wang Feng and the other woman in their group. It was a shameless, unacceptable demand. Wang Feng stood up boldly. "That lord told us to leave. You're violating his orders. Aren't you afraid of bringing trouble upon yourselves?" Lu Guang burst out laughing. "That lord? That damn lord? He's just a kid riding a wolf. If it weren't for that wolf under him, I'd beat him until he called me grandpa. You women, listen up. Try screaming and see if that lord of yours comes to save you. It's hilarious. You think you can scare us with some kid? That kid has probably run away by now." Wang Feng kan moi. Nong beat lam doi dang o catch day vi tram met. And hung lam sa lin lak duok voi han. Neen. On mat nong kin gak nin vi fia, Sao Lung Dam Lu Quang. Dai Nan. Lu Quang Koi Lan. Ninvong Phuong Nu Nin Ko Ngioc. Nu Tagi Tro Tre Con Nai Ma Kung Muon Lua Ta Sa. Nu Boi Din Noi Tang Na Com Qua Dang Dung Sao Lung Chung Ta A. Kak Nu Woi Vua Goi Tua La Tang Nok Sa. Zhang Qua Lam Thoi Vang Len Tu Phia, Sao Lung Dam Lu Quang. His spiritual power covered the area, so naturally, he had found them. Lu Guang spun around and saw Lin Shi standing a few meters away. He had appeared silently, and no one had noticed him. Brother Louis? A subordinate was so scared he started stuttering. Another young man named Wang Rui, after a moment of panic, looked around. Seeing that Lin Shi's beast wasn't there, he quickly calmed down. Brother Lu, his beast isn't here. What do we do? Wang Rui raised his hand, ready to strike. Yesterday, many people hadn't seen how strong Lin Shi really was. Who said someone who tamed a high-level beast had to be a high-level powerhouse? Maybe it was just luck. Now that he didn't have his beast, Lin Shi was dressed plainly, looked calm, and wasn't carrying any weapons. He didn't look dangerous at all, but Lu Guang still had to be careful. He looked at Lin Shi with a grim face. This is our base's business. I hope you won't interfere. I'm asking you, Lin Shi said. Were you the ones who just called me a kid? Wang Rui said, so what if? Before he could finish, the group's eyes blurred, and Lin Shi was right in front of him. Wang Rui was sent flying, soaring over 10 meters away. Under the horrified gazes of Lu Guang and his gang, he landed with a thud in a snowbank. Lin Shi said indifferently, it's nothing. I just hate being called a kid. The kick was precise and clean. Wang Rui. The others scrambled away from Lin Shi and ran to where Wang Rui had been kicked. Seeing him, they all gasped. The man lying in the snow looked like he'd been sliced in half. His organs and intestines were spilling out in a tangled mess. He was clearly dead as could be. Run? Everyone run. Lu Guang snapped out of it and immediately bolted. If he didn't run now, he'd be waiting for death. The others scattered, running in all directions. But it was too late. With a light step, Lin Shi caught up to the one who had insulted him the most. Before the man's terrified face, Lin Shi snapped his neck, then moved to the second, the third, and the fourth. Lu Guang hadn't run far before he heard the agonizing screams behind him. His legs went weak, and he collapsed in the snow. In his panic, Lu Guang tried to stand up, but a pair of legs appeared before him. Straight, long legs. Too bad they're a man's legs. That was the last thought that crossed Lu Guang's mind before his world plunged into eternal darkness. In the blink of an eye, Lin Shi had killed Lu Guang's entire group. The other four, except for Wang Fong, were frozen in shock, standing rooted to the spot. Especially the man who had spoken ill of Lin Shi this morning. He had now wet himself, peeing his pants in terror. Only Wang Fong's eyes had changed. She stared at Lin Shi without blinking. He was so young, almost boyish, looking like the younger brother she'd last seen before the apocalypse. Yet he was so powerful, easily killing Lu Guang's group. The men who had pushed them to the brink. He had killed them like he was stepping on a few ants. At that moment, Wang Fong finally understood. Maybe it wasn't that fate was unfair, but that she wasn't strong enough. If she were as strong as this man, she could shatter all of fate's injustices. Lin Shi wiped the blood from his boots, not even glancing at Wang Fong and the others, and walked off in one direction. Thank you. Wang Fong's voice rang out from behind him. Lin Shi didn't stop, acting as if he hadn't heard. He had simply seen some stray dogs barking at his door this morning and cleared them out for some peace and quiet. After Lin Shi left, Wang Fong and the others went to where he had been standing. There was no safe base at all, only flat, snow-covered ground. It was as if the safe base Wang Fong had seen yesterday afternoon only existed in her imagination. By now, Lin Shi had the long-armed apes finished digging up the safe base. He mounted Ma Wang and left the city. Initially, he had planned to use this city as a starting point to clear all of Dong province before moving on. But last night, Lin Shi suddenly realized that searching city by city was too inefficient and took too much effort and time. It was better to target specific cities. Right now, he needed mutated plants most, so he should go to places where plants grew well before the apocalypse. For example, Lin Tianrui had mentioned a place with a giant mutated plant, Yin Province. Lin Shi glanced at the map, determined the westward direction, and set off. Yun Province and Dong Province weren't too far apart. Only Shi Province lay between them. He just had to cross Shi Province to get there. With Ma Wang's speed, it probably wouldn't even take a day to arrive. But Lin sure wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to hunt some origin beasts along the way as food for his legion. If they only ate processed safe food every day, they couldn't level up. He didn't need to do it himself. He naturally left the task to Xiao Bai and Bao Jun. Shi Province had even more origin beasts than Dong Province. Along the way, Lin sure hunted about dozens of level 3 beasts, while level 2 and level 1 beasts were countless. Among them were many young origin beasts. They had begun to reproduce. This wasn't good news, but it was expected. Animals have a much faster and stronger reproductive rate than humans, especially origin beasts. Because they have strong physiques, their young are less likely to die early. At just 2 or 3 months old, young origin beasts can already eat meat like adults. After hunting the beasts, Lin sure collected over a dozen tigers, wolves, and leopards that were still nursing and put them into his space for the beasts there to care for. These young ones couldn't fight yet. He was afraid the clouded leopard wouldn't be able to handle caring for too many of them. Entering Shi Province, Lin sure saw very few survivors along the way. Those still alive on this land were almost no longer ordinary people. Nearly all were evolved humans. The further west he went, the more level 2 evolved humans Lin sure saw. Ordinary people could hardly survive in a place teeming with origin beasts. In a situation where they had to unite, survival required not only a division of labor, but also a strong overall power. The weak would be weeded out by the harsh environment. Someone like Chu Sheng, who could use a store as a survivor base, was very rare after all. Along the way, he no longer saw large bases like Chu Sheng's, but only small survival points with a few or a dozen people. Larger survival points were mostly built underground, like rat burrows, often going deeper than 10 meters. The temperature underground was much higher than on the surface. In his past life, many people had built underground survival points, but few dug that deep. If Lin sure didn't have spiritual power, he might not have even discovered them. Lin sure didn't cause conflict with other survivors. These survivors were all very good at hiding and highly alert. Even if someone saw Lin sure riding Ma Wang past, they avoided him like the plague and quickly left. Thus, hunting origin beasts, it took Lin sure 3 days to reach his destination, Yun Province. As soon as he entered Yun Province, Lin sure smelled an unusual scent. It wasn't the smell of danger, but a different scent in the air, like something diffusing through the atmosphere. Grr! Ma Wang looked alert, signaling Lin sure with a growl. It even let out a sneeze. Something was strange. Lin sure thought for a moment, took out a gas mask he'd prepared before the apocalypse from his space, and put it on. Ma Wang and the long-armed ape didn't have gas masks, though. Lin sure took out a few masks and pieces of cloth from his space and modified them, making a large mask for Ma Wang and the long-armed ape to wear. For safety, Lin sure put Xiao Bai and Bao Jun into his space first. From inside the space, a long weapon appeared, a heavy, sharp battle axe. Lin sure drew the Qi Yun sword and shouldered it. Normally, Lin sure didn't need to act, but now that he felt something was off, he decided to keep his weapon within reach. Of course, the sword was just a disguise. If a crisis arose and the enemy thought he was drawing his sword, he would use his mind to pull out the battle axe and launch a surprise attack. Only then would he have to eliminate anyone who saw him use the space. Lin sure slowed Ma Wang down to prepare for any accidents. As it turned out, after circling the first city, he found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not only were there no people, but there weren't even any origin beasts. The entire city was like a ghost town. Lin sure didn't just search the surface thoroughly. He didn't miss anything underground either. Still, he found nothing. Standing in the middle of the deserted city, he heard only the howling wind and saw the cold white snow covering everything. That loneliness made the cold bite to the bone. What had happened to this city? Could there have been a beast tide that wiped out all the residents, after which the Beast King led the tide away? This wasn't impossible, but for the first city in Yun Province to be like this made Lin sure feel puzzled. With no other clues, he didn't want to linger. So, he rode Ma Wang, with the long-armed ape in tow, toward the next city. Surprisingly, the next 2 cities also yielded no discoveries. Standing at the city border, Lin sure felt an eerie silence. One city without people or beasts he could call a coincidence. But two cities without any living souls? What did this mean? Had Yun province been devastated by a massive beast tide, turning it into a dead land without a single person? If it was a beast tide, how terrifyingly large must it have been? And after the tide killed everyone, where did the beasts go? Where did they move to? Lin Shi was baffled. The next city was the one with the giant mutated plant Lin Tianrui had mentioned. But now, Lin Shi felt like turning back. The unknown was the most terrifying thing. After thinking for a long time, Lin Shi finally decided to continue. Currently, his strength was top tier in the world. Even if he met a level 6, he could put up a fight. He couldn't just turn and run before even seeing the enemy. Lin Shi kept his spiritual power active. Suddenly, he was startled. A person had entered his spiritual range. This was the first person Lin Shi had encountered since entering Yun province. His expression shifted slightly. Over there. There's someone. Lin Shi patted Ma Wang's neck, signaling a change in direction. At that moment, Lin Shi realized the long-armed ape wasn't following. Thinking the ape had found something, he saw its origin power fluctuating as it sat down on the spot, looking sleepy. Lin Shi had seen this many times with Ma Wang and the other beasts, so he understood. The long-armed ape was starting to evolve. Along the way, it had eaten 2 mutated fruits and some origin beast meat. Lin Shi hadn't expected the ape to evolve so quickly. It was truly beyond Lin Shi's expectations. For a level 4 beast to evolve to level 5, it took at least a dozen hours, maybe even longer. Since the ape had started evolving, Lin Shi had to put it into his space and let the clouded leopard keep an eye on it. Then, he and Ma Wang headed toward the person his spiritual power had detected. When he was still over 2,000 meters away, Lin Shi thought for a moment and also put Ma Wang away. He approached the person alone. He wanted to ask a few questions, and bringing Ma Wang would be inconvenient. As he got closer, Lin Shi intentionally made his footsteps heavier. Who's there? Hearing the noise, the person looked toward Lin Shi alertly. Lin Shi raised both hands to show he had no ill intentions. Hello? I'm lost. May I ask where this is? Why is there no one around? Seeing Lin Shi, the man sized him up and frowned. An outsider? Outsider. Lin Shi repeated the word in his mind, then said calmly, I'm from Dong province. I'm looking for a relative in Gayan City, Yun province. Do you know which way Gayan City is? The man had messy, greasy hair and wore dirty, ragged, bulky clothes. His face was grimy, making him look like a vagrant from before the apocalypse. His age was hard to tell. From Dong province? I don't recognize your accent. The man still looked at Lin Shi warily, even secretly reaching toward a pocket. My hometown is in High City. Before the apocalypse, I studied at Dongdai University, and then I stayed in Dong province. But being alone in the apocalypse really isn't safe, so I wanted to find my uncle in Yun province. Lin Shi lied without thinking, not even blinking. Even so, he didn't expect the other party to believe him. After all, in the apocalypse, trust was the rarest thing. But to Lin Shi's surprise, after hearing his fabricated story, the man seemed to believe him. Not only did he take his hand away from the pocket holding the small knife, but he even took a few steps closer to Lin Shi. You're right. In the apocalypse, you need people to rely on. It's very hard to survive alone. To be honest, all the survivors in Yun province are currently gathered in Gayan City, where we've developed a small base. If you're looking for someone in Yun province, once you find the right person, the one you're looking for will surely be in the base. Since you have an acquaintance there, you're not an outsider. It's getting late. Why don't you come back with me? Lin Shi didn't expect it to be this easy. He had been prepared to seize the man and interrogate him if he refused to talk. He didn't expect the man to agree to lead the way just by hearing his lie. Besides, since when did Yun province have a small base? He hadn't heard Lin Tianrui or the others mention it when he was in Jia City. Although Lin Shi was still suspicious, he kept a smile on his face. That's great then. I'll have to trouble you to lead the way. Oh, what should I call you? No need to be so formal. Just call me Little Brother Chu. Little Brother Chu said this, and then brushed back his messy hair, revealing slightly yellowed teeth. Lin Shi's veins bulged slightly. Thank you, Little Brother. Let's go then. On the way, Lin Shi stayed close to Little Brother Chu, probing as they walked. Little Brother, why haven't I seen any origin beasts along the way? Origin beasts? What's that? Little Brother Chu asked suspiciously. They're large, fierce beasts, Lin Shi said, slightly surprised. Lin Tianrui and the others had collected information on origin beasts and broadcasted via radio to help survivors with equipment understand the current situation and survive more easily. If they had established a small base, their infrastructure should be fairly complete. How could they not even know what an origin beast was? Oh, you mean those monsters? We cleared them out, little brother Chu explained casually, giving the reason why Lin Shi hadn't seen any. Cleared them out? You cleared out all the origin beasts in the entire Yun province. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes. The entire Yun province? Such a vast area. How much manpower would it take to clear it? Could there be a top-tier expert at their base? Sure enough, little brother Chu's next words explained everything. No, we have Lord Yuni. Lord Yuni. Lin Shi was quite surprised. Through their subsequent conversation, Lin Shi learned about Yun Yi from little brother Chu. Yun Yi was about 30 years old and was one of the key figures who founded this small base. In the base, he called himself a messenger of God. According to little brother Chu, Yun Yi had very strong combat power, but how strong exactly, he didn't know. He only said he was very strong enough to kill all the origin beasts. Lin Shi chuckled. The apocalypse was here, and there were still people this superstitious? After talking for a while, Lin Shi realized little brother Chu had no concept of levels. Not just him, but everyone he knew. They had no concept of origin beast levels. All the information they had about the outside world was provided by the man named Yun Yi. Yun Yi was their leader and their god. Currently, the base had 3 messengers of God, with Yun Yi being the strongest, but not the most terrifying. The most terrifying person was named Xie Shan. Lin Shi was about to ask more, but little brother Chu stopped talking. Lin Shi didn't press him. He knew enough of the basic situation and could find out the rest himself once he reached the base. But Lin Shi still had one doubt. Lin Tianrui had said that someone in the shelter had been to Yun province and brought back a giant leaf. Logically, if that person had passed by little brother Chu's base, there was no way they wouldn't have noticed it. He didn't know if that person hadn't mentioned it, or if Lin Tianrui was hiding something from him. Lin Shi leaned toward the first possibility, but why would that person hide it? Little brother Chu was a level 2 evolved human. His evolution speed wasn't slow. He walked with little brother Chu for over 2 hours. The two went from the city deep into the mountains. Lin Shi felt something was wrong and asked little brother Chu, "Is your base in the mountains?" Deep mountains were full of fierce beasts, far from urban areas, and supplies were scarce. Building a base here would certainly be much harder than in the city. Lin Shi couldn't understand why the base leader would choose such a remote mountain range. There must be a reason for this anomaly. Though he still followed little brother Chu, Lin Shi was on high alert. Speaking of our base's location, I have to thank Lord Yun Yi again. Little brother Chu became excited as soon as he mentioned Yun Yi, his eyes full of worship. At first, we only had a small outpost in the city. Back then, we were starving and freezing. To make a living, many people died every day. Then one day, Lord Yun Yi suddenly told us there was plenty of food on this mountain. At first, we were skeptical, but it turned out to be true. Since then, we moved the base here and took in all the survivors in Yun province. How many people are in your base? With so many people, is there enough food to go around? Lin Shi asked in surprise. Enough? Not only is there enough, but we can't even finish it all. Lord Yun Yi even said he wanted to help others survive the apocalypse together. It might scare you to hear this, but our base has over 50,000 people, occupying an entire mountain. Having said this, little brother Chu turned back to look at Lin Shi with a mysterious smile. Haha, once you reach the base, you'll understand what a miracle is. After saying that, he continued leading the way. Lin Shi fell into deep thought. Over 50,000 people, that was quite a lot. But just one base? And what did he mean by a miracle? He guessed the man named Yun Yi had probably found a large area of mutated plants. After all, before the apocalypse, Yun province had rich vegetation. Even though the mountains were now covered in white, no different from elsewhere, the sheer quantity meant the probability of mutated plants appearing was higher. Could mutated plants be under this thick layer of snow? If they found a large area of edible, self-growing mutated plants, it wouldn't be strange to build a base around them. It was just, Lin Shi always felt the situation wasn't as simple as he imagined. Why would the man named Yun E resort to this superstitious nonsense after becoming the base leader? Was it to relieve the survival pressure on the survivors? The two walked for over half an hour, crossing a fairly high mountain peak, and the scene in the distance left Lin Shi stunned. On the third mountain peak ahead stood a giant ancient tree. Even without using his spiritual power, the massive tree was clearly visible to Lin Shi. It was so large that its height was hard to determine. From a distance, it looked like a giant mushroom growing out of the mountainside. The mushroom was almost as large as the mountain itself, but Lin Shi immediately realized it wasn't a mushroom. He subconsciously extended his spiritual power toward the giant tree. To his surprise, his spiritual power, which had always been successful, was blocked by some kind of membrane when it reached the tree. Not only did his spiritual power fail to scan the tree, but it was also reflected back. The backlash made Lin Shi's mind go blank and his ears ring. This was a spiritual backlash. Startled, he quickly withdrew his spiritual power. He didn't show it on the outside, but his heart was racing. Little brother Chu didn't seem to notice Lin Shi's abnormality. Seeing Lin Shi standing still, he thought he was just dazed. He said, "See that? That is our divine tree." Divine tree. Lin Shi stared intently at the giant tree. Has this tree always been here? Or has it always been this big? Lord Yun E found this divine tree. It bears a lot of fruit. When I joined the base, it was already this big. It seems to have grown a little bit more. Lin Shi's expression was serious. This tree had definitely appeared after the apocalypse. With how developed the internet was before the apocalypse, there was no way such a giant tree would have gone undiscovered. Seeing that tree, the giant mutated plant Lin Tianrui had mentioned immediately came to mind. So it was here. Although he had found the giant mutated plant he was looking for, Lin Shi didn't look happy at all. In the current situation, he couldn't absorb this mutated plant. If he did, he feared the entire base of over 50,000 people would collapse without their divine tree. To increase his own strength by stripping away the livelihood of over 50,000 people. This was something he couldn't do. Seeing that Lin Shi said nothing, little brother Chu urged him, "Let's hurry. We need to reach the base before dark, or the night road will be hard to travel. Once we reach the base, we'll be safe." Having said that, he continued toward the giant tree. Lin Shi quickened his pace to catch up. Since he was already here, he at least had to investigate thoroughly, even if he couldn't absorb it. Observing it and broadening his horizons would be good too. Aren't there many origin beasts deep in the mountains at night? You built your base here. Aren't you attacked by them at night? As it grew dark, Lin Shi suddenly asked. Even if they could eliminate the beasts, more would surely appear nearby after a while. Little brother Chu didn't look back and said, "Of course not. The divine tree protects us. It won't let the monsters attack us." Surveying the area, Lin Shi basically confirmed that this was a very high-level giant mutated plant. Only that could explain why other beasts didn't dare approach, and why his spiritual power couldn't scan it. What concerned Lin Shi was, could plants eventually develop their own consciousness when they reached a higher stage of evolution? Could a plant without consciousness evolve spiritual power? As the two got closer to the divine tree, Lin Shi discovered more and more traces of human life around them. The mountain looks close, but is far enough to kill a horse. Finally, Lin Shi caught up with little brother Chu. It wasn't until dark that they reached the outside of the headquarters little brother Chu had mentioned, which was at the foot of the mountain where the divine tree stood. Open up. Open up. I'm back." Little brother Chu panted, pounding on the wooden gate. The gate was over 3 meters high, made entirely of thick wooden logs lashed together. The entire exterior of the base was also built with wooden logs forming a fence. These logs surrounded the entire mountain. The quality of the logs showed that this wall was very new, likely finished not long ago. Elsewhere, survivors lacked wood even to start a fire for warmth, yet here they used piles of it to build a wall. Yun Province truly lived up to its reputation. The snow on the ground had been leveled, revealing dark red soil. Although it was pitch black, in Lin Shi's eyes, it was as bright as noon. Upon reaching the outside of the base, he looked up and saw the divine tree. He didn't know if the information Lin Tianrui received was wrong, or if the tree had grown even more during this time. The tree was at least over 20 meters tall, with a canopy 20 to 30 meters wide. The trunk was roughly 5 to 6 meters in diameter. From a distance, Its overall shape was like a giant mushroom or a massive umbrella covering the entire mountain. From this distance, the patterns on the divine tree's trunk and the giant leaves on top were clearly visible. Lin Shi looked up and observed for a while, but didn't find the fruit little brother Chu had mentioned. Suddenly, the wooden gate creaked, and a small opening the size of a human head appeared. A figure peeked out. "Oh, little brother Chu? Why are you back so late? The gate is already locked." Sorry. I brought someone back with me, so I was delayed." Little brother Chu apologized repeatedly. Actually, halfway there, little brother Chu said he wanted to take a detour, and Lin Shi had waited half an hour for him before continuing. A faint light shone toward Lin Shi. The person then said, "What's with this guy? Why is he wearing a gas mask? You know the Lord's rules. No masks in the base. Masks are to prevent bad people from sneaking in." "I forgot." Little brother Chu gave the man an apologetic smile, then turned to Lin Shi. "Big brother, take off the gas mask. It's safe here, there's no toxic gas." Lin Shi had worn the mask the whole way. Hearing this, he paused for a moment, then took it off and put it in his backpack. As soon as he took it off, the scent he'd smelled upon entering Yun province immediately hit him. It hit his nose. He'd thought it was an illusion before because the smell was so faint. Now, the scent was almost flying straight into the back of his nose. By now, how could Lin Shi not know this scent came from the divine tree? "Do you smell anything?" Lin Shi asked, covering his mouth and nose. "The scent? You mean the divine tree's scent?" "Of course. The divine tree uses its scent to drive away monsters." Little brother Chu called origin beasts monsters. Could a single mutated plant emit a scent that covered the entire Yun province? Even though this was the largest mutated plant Lin Shi had ever seen, he couldn't help but be amazed. Little brother Chu patted Lin Shi's shoulder. "Don't worry, it's not toxic. We've been smelling it for over a month, and we're fine." Saying that, little brother Chu took a deep breath. To be honest, once you get used to it, it smells better and better. At that moment, the wooden gate opened wide, and Lin Shi saw an old man over 60 years old guarding the gate. A survivor of this age was very rare in the apocalypse, let alone one working as a guard. From the old man, Lin Shi also sensed a faint trace of origin power. "Little brother, don't be so careless next time. Come back a bit earlier. You probably took a detour again, didn't you? Careful you don't get eaten by wild wolves next time." The old man scolded little brother Chu. "I brought this brother back, that's why I was a bit late." "Old Zhao, I wasn't just wandering around." Little brother Chu waved his hand in explanation. "You brat, this isn't the first or second time. Talk to people less. If you're late like this again, I'll report you to Lord Yuni. I'll tell him you're staying too far from the divine tree and see how he deals with you." Old Zhao pointed at little brother Chu in warning. I know. Let me borrow a torch." Little brother Chu snatched the torch from old Zhao's hand and quickly ran into the darkness, not forgetting to call out to Lin Shi. "Hurry up, brother, before that old man catches up." Old Zhao laughed and cursed. "You little rascal. You follow him. Stay at little brother Chu's place for the night. Tomorrow, someone in the base will arrange housing for you." Lin Shi nodded and chased after him, but little brother Chu was already out of sight. Little brother Chu's house was on the mountainside. According to him, those on the mountainside were the base's veterans. Anyone joining the base was prioritized for housing at the top, then gradually moved down toward the foot of the mountain. "What's on that peak?" Lin Shi asked. "The peak is where the 3 messengers of God live. Normally, we're not allowed up there," little brother Chu said. At this point, his expression became serious. "Our base may be loosely managed, but there are certain rules that must be followed. Once you officially join, someone will tell you." Lin Shi nodded. Since entering the base, his spiritual power couldn't be projected outward. He felt that the entire mountain, within a range of several hundred meters, was covered in a strange spiritual field, or rather, a special kind of field, as Lin Shi wasn't sure it was spiritual power. Little brother Chu's house was a simple earthen hut, primarily made of wood. If there were no blizzards, it was enough to block the wind and rain. The divine tree's canopy helped the survivors below block a good deal of wind and snow. Little brother Chu's house was right within the canopy's reach. "Come in. The door is simple, don't mind it." Little brother Chu pushed the door open and brought the torch inside. The interior was even simpler. A stove, a set of wooden table and chairs, and a crude bed. On the bed was an old set of bedding. Compared to little brother Chu's appearance, the bedding looked quite clean. You must be tired tonight. Go straight to sleep on the bed. I'll go start a fire for warmth. You go ahead. Since this chaos started, even Southerners have to sleep on beds. You live long enough, you see everything. Little brother Chu muttered as he started the fire. Only Lin Shi stared at the bedding, a fierce struggle in his mind. After a long while, Lin Shi said to little brother Chu, "You sleep on the bed. I'll just sit and sleep." The next morning, Lin Shi, who had sat by the stove all night, was the first to open his eyes. It was still dark outside. Lin Shi had a biological clock. He woke up at 6 every day. Moreover, he hadn't slept at all last night, only closing his eyes to meditate. Years of training had made him alert, making it impossible for him to share a bed with a stranger, and not because the other person was a man. Lin Shi stood up and stretched his slightly stiff joints. He walked toward the door. As soon as he opened it, a gust of cold wind blew in. Lin Shi immediately stepped outside and closed the door. It all took less than a second. In his dream, little brother Chu shivered and fell back into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, as soon as he stepped out, Lin Shi's expression changed drastically. He kicked off the ground and leaped to the left to dodge. Without him knowing when, a person was standing by the door. This person was wearing a full-body hooded robe, hidden in the shadows. In the dim light of dawn, he looked incredibly eerie. The person emitted no killing intent, and with his spiritual power unusable. Lin Shi hadn't noticed anyone was there at first. "Sorry, did I startle you?" The man looked up, revealing a face with gold-rimmed glasses. He was handsome and refined, looking like the intellectual type from a pre-apocalypse novel. Lin Shi said nothing. Everyone in this base was a stranger to him. He didn't know if this person was in charge of receiving him. Even so, this person had arrived far too early. Thinking about how he'd been watched by a pair of eyes outside the door while he was resting, Lin Shi felt an uneasy sensation. Spiritual power couldn't be projected here, and at a certain distance, he couldn't even sense the origin power fluctuations of others. Lin Shi felt like he was blindfolded. It was very hard to adapt. "You're the newcomer little brother Chu brought back last night." Seeing that Lin Shi didn't answer, the man spoke first. "Anyway, please come with me. I have a few things to tell you about the base. Afterward, you can consider whether to join or leave." Lin Shi dropped his guard. The man said, "Then follow me. By the way, can you see clearly? If so, I won't turn on the flashlight." Lin Shi only then noticed the man was holding a flashlight. Ordinary people had to reach level 3 gene unlocking to see clearly at night. This man with glasses seemed to have already determined his level, likely from his reaction speed when he opened the door earlier. Lin Shi neither admitted nor denied it. He followed the man up the mountain. On this mountain, from the foot to the mountainside, houses were very dense, stretching across the entire mountain. Only near the peak were the houses sparse, partly hidden by the divine tree, so the specific situation wasn't clear. Following the man to the destination, Lin Shi asked, "Didn't you say people aren't normally allowed on the peak?" "That's right, normally they aren't. But since you're a newcomer, you're allowed up once. After you join the base, you can't come up without notice." The man shrugged and turned back to give Lin Shi a mischievous smile, looking very familiar. Lin Shi frowned. "May I ask who you are?" "Me? I'm the messenger of God here, and also the manager of this base. My name is Yun Yi." His pupils contracted. This man was Yun Yi. He immediately went on high alert. A newcomer joining the base being personally received by the leader. This was the first time Lin Shi had encountered this. From little brother Chu, he knew Yun Yi was very strong, capable of clearing out Yun province's monsters. He was at least level 3 or higher. Around level 4. This man had been standing in front of little brother Chu's wooden house earlier. He didn't know how long he'd been waiting. Lin Shi was slightly spooked. "You seem quite interested in the position of messenger of God in this base," Yun Yi said to himself. "Actually, it's nothing. The apocalypse is here, and many people have mental issues. Rather than letting them self-destruct, it's better to give them something to believe in. But you're a strong person with a firm will. You surely don't believe in such vague, illusory things." "You know my strength?" Lin Shi's expression shifted slightly. The two still kept a moderate distance. Lin Shi sensed a faint origin power breath from Yun Yi, but couldn't tell his level. Theoretically, Yuan shouldn't be able to see his strength either, even if they were the same level. But that was impossible. No hidden family had anyone named Yuan, and no one had a heaven-defying opportunity like Lin Shi's treasure basin. No one had an advancement speed like his. Lin Shi was extremely doubtful. He thought Yuan was intentionally acting mysterious. By now, they had arrived in front of a wooden house larger than those on the mountainside. This location was actually just a bit further from the mountainside. Yuan didn't lead Lin Shi any higher. The distance from here to the divine tree was only about a dozen meters. Lin Shi clearly saw the roots clinging to the dark red soil, and every line and pattern on the tree was visible. With the entire giant tree right above his head, the scene was even more spectacular, and the scent in the air was even stronger. Yuan pushed open the door of the wooden house, revealing a dark room inside. By the way, the divine tree told me. From the moment you entered this base, it told me a powerhouse had arrived. Lin Shi was about to follow Yuan but stopped. The divine tree? It has consciousness. Yuan Yi's words truly stunned Lin Shi. Plants couldn't have consciousness. This had always been ingrained in his mind. Because plants don't have brains. Humans and animals rely on brains to think. But what about plants? Yuan didn't answer. He had already entered the wooden house. Soon, a fire lit up inside the house, illuminating an exquisitely carved wooden table. Yuan was already sitting at the table, doing something. It's cold outside. Come in, Yuan said. Lin Shi suppressed his shock, stepped inside, and closed the door. Lock the door. So the wind doesn't blow out the torch, Yuan added. Lin Shi subconsciously turned to close the door. Suddenly, the hair on his neck stood up, and his heart pounded. He immediately turned and threw a kick. Yuan had appeared beside him without him knowing. Caught in the kick, Yuan Yi's face looked strange in the firelight. His glasses seemed fogged up by the heat from the torch, making it impossible for Lin Shi to see his eyes. Yuan gave a dry laugh and said, I forgot to say, this door needs to be bolted, or it won't stay shut. Lin Shi's face turned serious. I also forgot to say, I don't like people getting that close to me. You should have warned me. All right, I'll be careful next time. Yuan gave Lin Shi another apologetic smile and turned back to the table. At this moment, they were very close. Lin Shi felt that with just a reach of his hand, he could grab Yuan Yi's neck and snap it in an instant. In the end, Lin Shi restrained the thought. For now, the two seemed to have no grudge. Killing the base leader for no reason wouldn't be right. But the shivering sensation from earlier still haunted him. Lin Shi decided to stay for a day to investigate and then leave. This place made him feel uncomfortable. Please sit. Yuan pulled out a chair for Lin Shi, then handed him a cup of pale green tea. Lin Shi naturally wouldn't drink something a stranger gave him. He looked at the tea and noticed the leaves at the bottom looked unusual. This is made from the divine tree's leaves. It's much more effective for mental clarity than green tea. Give it a try, Yuan explained. No thanks. Drinking tea on an empty stomach is bad for the digestion. Just get straight to the point, Lin Shi politely declined. Yuan didn't press him and took a sip of the tea himself. Then he said, Before I introduce the base, may I ask where you're from? Lin Shi was about to say he was from Dong province, but for some reason, he said, I'm from Jia City. Oh, then didn't you meet our people about a year ago? Or 4 years ago? Lin Shi frowned. A year ago? What do you mean? Lin Shi blinked a few times, suddenly remembering the person who brought the divine tree leaf to the shelter. You used the word also. Does that mean someone else here has met them? That's right. What a coincidence. Exactly 3 days ago, in the evening, a team from the official base in Jia City arrived. I thought you were with them. Yuan said with a squinting smile. This time, Lin Shi was truly surprised. Could Lin Tianrui's people have arrived? Lin Tianrui had said he would send people along with scientists to see this mutated tree. Lin Shi had been delayed a few days looking for mutated plants. Calculating the time, if Lin Tianrui's people traveled fast, they would have arrived. Where are they? Lin Shi asked. So you do know them. They're at the foot of the mountain. I'll take you to them later. Since you know them, no need to ask more. Let me introduce the base's situation to you. Yuan cleared his throat, his expression serious. Our base doesn't have many rules, but every one must be followed. First, whether you're an outsider or a member, no one is allowed to kill within the base perimeter. Second, Upon entering the base, you must hand over your personal belongings to prevent damage to the base. Old Zhao forgot to mention this last night. These items are only held to ensure that if you leave, you can take them back at any time. Third, if you don't join the base, you must leave within 2 days. If you choose to join, there are a few rules for applicants. I'll talk about that later. The most important thing is, no one is allowed on the peak or near the divine tree. After saying this, Yun-yi stared at Lin Shi, observing his reaction. Lin Shi nodded in understanding. I understand. He had no intention of doing anything to the divine tree that 50,000 people relied on for survival. China was vast, and many places had rich vegetation before the apocalypse. After leaving here, he would surely find other mutated trees. He'd just keep looking. His important items were in his storage space. The things in his backpack were just for show. Handing them over didn't bother him. Lin Shi asked briefly, I have a question. How did you arrange for the people from Jia City? They've been here for 3 days. If they were only supposed to stay for 2, why didn't they leave yesterday? Those people? They've decided to join the base. What did you say? Lin Shi's eyes widened as he looked at Yun-yi. Yun-yi still wore a faint smile. Our place has no danger from monsters, no shortage of food, and plenty of firewood. Is it so strange that they joined? It was very strange. The scientific research team sent to Yun province this time was surely escorted by people Lin Tianrui trusted. How could they wait only 2 days and then decide to stay? Or was this a stalling tactic of theirs? To stay longer and study the mutated plant? Thinking of this, Lin Shi calmed down. In that case, I'd like to meet them. He needed to contact the people from Jia City to assess the situation. If it were Wang Chao and the others, there was no way they would join this base. If it were someone else, it was hard to say. Yun-yi nodded and smiled, not objecting. Of course, I can take you to meet them. But at this hour, they're probably resting. Sir, I have a question. Do you want to join our base? Lin Shi thought for a moment and decided not to refuse outright. I still have 2 days. I'll give you a definite answer after I understand the situation here. Yun-yi didn't say anything more. A wise choice. It's still early, so have some breakfast here before you go meet them. Lin Shi was about to refuse, but Yun-yi added, it's the divine tree's fruit. No preparation needed, you can eat it directly. Since you're here, you must try our specialty. Having said that, he stood up and opened a wooden cabinet in front of Lin Shi, taking out 2 unremarkable-looking things. Yun-yi placed one before Lin Shi. It looked like an enlarged Delinia fruit, covered in fine fuzz, with a grayish-brown skin. It was about the size of an adult's palm. One of these is enough to fill you up. It's very nutritious and satisfying. It tastes good too. Try it. If it were any other food, Lin Shi absolutely wouldn't eat it. But this was the fruit of that giant mutated plant. He wanted to know if it enhanced spiritual power. Trying the fruit would tell him immediately. If it really enhanced spiritual power, he could trade something else with the base for it. Moreover, the fruit's skin was intact, and his keen sense of smell didn't detect any drugs or other substances. The chance of it being poisoned was very low. Thinking of this, Lin Shi picked it up. He imitated Yun-yi in peeling it. The skin wasn't soft like other fruits, but more like a nut shell, very brittle. A little pressure cracked it, revealing the glossy white flesh inside. The flesh was milky white and had the faint scent of the divine tree. It was definitely the divine tree's fruit. Seeing Lin Shi staring at him, Yun-yi ate first, taking a large bite. He drank a few sips of tea and ate a divine tree fruit along with it. The divine fruit is a bit sour, so I like to have it with divine tree tea. It's quite delicious. Seeing this, Lin Shi didn't hesitate and peeled one to try. It felt powdery and smooth, a bit like a boiled potato that wasn't quite cooked. It was slightly sweet. Overall, it was okay. But his spiritual power didn't increase. Instead, his origin power seemed to weaken slightly. Lin Shi was slightly disappointed and sighed. Feeling a bit of a sour aftertaste, he was about to take some tea, but suddenly froze. Then he calmly finished the fruit, leaving the tea untouched. Seeing Lin Shi finish, Yun-yi cleared away the peels and stood up. Let's go. It's almost dawn. I'll take you to find the people from Jia City. Lin Shi nodded, then suddenly asked, by the way, can I have a few more of these fruits? Of course. We have plenty of these. They're called divine fruits. Yun-yi took 6 more from the cabinet and handed them to Lin Shi. Lin Shi thanked him and the two went down the mountain together. Yun-E walked ahead. In the dim light, the corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. But Yun-E didn't see that behind him. A flash of killing intent appeared in Lin Shi's eyes that only he could recognize. Reaching the foot of the mountain, Yun-E led Lin Shi to a wooden house that looked no different from the others. Lin Shi noticed the number 2323 carved very small next to the door frame. Yun-E knocked, and there was a sound from inside. A moment later, a sleepy-looking man in a robe opened the door. Seeing Yun-E, he said in surprise, "Lord Yun-E?" Yun-E stepped aside, revealing Lin Shi behind him. Seeing Lin Shi's unfamiliar face, the man was stunned and looked at Yun-E in confusion. This man was a researcher from Jia City. After Lin Shi announced his identity, he no longer worked at the research institute. The researchers who were always at the lab hadn't met Lin Shi in person, so they didn't recognize him. Lin Shi, however, recognized him immediately. He was one of Li Xianke's former students. Lin Shi asked bluntly, "You're here. Who's the captain this time?" The researcher grew even more confused and said, "You are? I'm an old friend of Lin Tianrui. You know Leader Lin?" The researcher was startled but didn't doubt him. The captain this time is Tan Shuang. Talking to this person was quite difficult. It was better to ask Tan Shuang. Lin Shi continued, "Where is Tan Shuang?" "Captain Tan is over there, 3 houses down." "All right, thanks." Lin Shi nodded to the researcher and headed toward the house the man had pointed out. Yun-E said to the researcher, "It's fine. Go back to rest." The researcher nodded and closed the door. From inside the room, an elderly voice called out, "Xiaodong, who was it?" "Teacher, Lord Yun-E was just here. He brought someone who said he's a friend of Leader Lin, looking for Captain Tan Shuang." Lin Shi reached Tan Shuang's door and knocked. It opened immediately, revealing Tan Shuang's delicate face, though she looked quite exhausted. Seeing Lin Shi, Tan Shuang's eyes widened in shock. She seemingly hadn't expected him to be here. "You." Tan Shuang was about to say something, but seeing Yun-E behind Lin Shi, she changed her words. "Brother, why are you here?" Lin Shi thought for a moment, knowing something was up, but why did he feel like he was being used? "We need to talk." "Thank you, Leader Yun-E, for leading the way." Lin Shi turned back to Yun-E. His intention to dismiss him couldn't be clearer. Yun-E smiled. "Then I won't disturb you. When you've made up your mind, just tell the gate guard." Having said that, he turned and left decisively. Lin Shi waited for Yun-E to leave before signaling Tan Shuang to go inside. Lin Shi spoke first. "You've been here since yesterday. How did you get here?" Tan Shuang sighed. "About a year ago, they brought us here." Tan Shuang seemed to want to say something, but her expression was hesitant. Seeing Tan Shuang's face, Lin Shi understood. There was definitely something she couldn't say directly. Lin Shi stood up and said, "All right, never mind. I ate a bit too much. Let's go for a walk outside." Tan Shuang followed Lin Shi out of the room. They headed straight for the base gate. It was now daylight, and the gate guards had changed shifts. It wasn't old Zhao, whom Lin Shi had met last night, but the gate was still tightly shut. The 2 guards were 2 ordinary middle-aged men. Seeing Lin Shi and Tan Shuang approach, they stopped them. "Stop. What do you think you're doing? Are we not allowed to go out? You need an order from Lord Yun-E to go out. Otherwise, you can't." "I remember people coming and going freely yesterday," Tan Shuang said from behind. "The rules changed today. Lord Yun-Yi's order is our rule." Lin Shi narrowed his eyes. He arrived yesterday, and today they weren't allowed in or out. It was hard for him not to think this rule was aimed at him. "I'm not one of your people yet. You want to stop me too?" Actually, he didn't necessarily have to use the main gate. The 2 middle-aged men glared, about to say something, when their expressions suddenly changed. "If you insist on going out, then go. Don't blame us if you die out there." Having said that, they opened the gate. Lin Shi looked at the 2 and led Tan Shuang out of the base. Tan Shuang was about to say something, but Lin Shi interrupted. "Wait, which mountain has a good view? Let's go check it out." This place was too close to the base. If that divine tree really had the ability to sense spiritual energy, it might hear them talking. Tan Shuang immediately understood Lin Shi's meaning and followed without a word. On the way, Lin Shi still held the fruit he'd received from Yun-E. The 2 walked from deep in the mountains to the inner city of Gayan before stopping. "All right, this is fine. Tell me what happened." Tan Shuang had walked a long way. Her face was tired, and her spirits were low. She said, "I feel like we've fallen into a trap." 10 days ago, Tan Shuang's group left the shelter. Before departing, Lin Tianrui handed them over to a man who had been here about a year ago, the one who brought the giant leaf, to lead them to Yun province. The team consisted of Tan Shuang, 10 level 2 evolved soldiers, and 4 researchers. To make the journey smoother and transport experimental items, Lin Tianrui allowed them to ride origin beasts. Considering the researchers' frail health, he even specially made windproof sleds for them. Initially, everything went smoothly, but halfway there, Tan Shuang noticed a researcher was always being evasive. His behavior was very strange. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Li Xinke, who had sneaked into the research group. Good heavens, if anything happened to this old man, what would the research institute do? Tan Shuang wanted to send Li Xinke back, but how could the stubborn old man leave once he'd arrived? He threw a tantrum, threatening to go on a hunger strike if he was sent back. After contacting Lin Tianrui via radio, he reluctantly agreed to let them take Li Xinke to Yun province. However, they increased the personnel. Upon arriving in Yun province, the man who had been there a year ago revealed that the mutated tree was actually inside the Yun province base. He hadn't mentioned it before because he feared Lin Tianrui would think he had once rebelled against the base, affecting the shelter. By this point, Tan Shuang already felt something was wrong. But even knowing the giant tree was in a base, Li Xinke insisted on going. Then they were led to this headquarters by that man. "We arrived at this base yesterday. Yun received us and seized our belongings. Initially, we brought our own food, but he insisted we try the local specialty, the fruit of the divine tree, called the divine fruit. At first, we didn't eat it, but seeing everyone in the headquarters eating it, many for over a month without issue, someone tried it. Seeing no problem, everyone ate. But since eating the divine fruit, everything has become unusual." Tan Shuang recounted fearfully. "At first, I didn't notice anything wrong. Director Li wanted to get close to the divine tree, but there were many guards around. He couldn't get near, so he asked me to go check. I took advantage of the darkness to sneak in and get some bark and sap for Director Li to study. I didn't expect that even at night, there would be so many guards. I didn't pay much attention at the time, planning to wait until they weren't looking to pass through. To my surprise, they spotted me immediately. They didn't use torches, yet they still saw my position. It turns out they were all level 3 evolved humans. I was terrified, but luckily I ran fast and hid in my room. I thought Yun would come to settle the score the next day, but nothing happened. It felt like I was dreaming. I told Director Li about not being able to get close to the divine tree. He seemed very disappointed, but remained silent. We were fully prepared to leave the base on the 3rd day. But just after lunch, Director Li suddenly said he wanted to join this base. Not just him, but the other 3 researchers as well. Director Li said they would pretend to join the base, wait to harvest the divine tree, and then leave. He said this divine tree could provide enough food for a base of 50,000 people. Such a miraculous plant must be tested to see if it can be propagated. This made me even more uneasy. He said this divine tree could provide enough food for a base of 50,000 people. Such a miraculous plant must be tested to see if it can be propagated. This made me even more uneasy. I protested vehemently, but this mission was for Director Li's research goals. I had to give in. Afterward, I noticed the team members also began to act strangely. Someone even said staying here wouldn't be bad, no danger from monsters, no need to risk our lives to survive. It was like escaping to a paradise. A team member I trusted very much reported this to me. That afternoon, I dealt with the soldier who was inciting the troops. But that night, even I had the thought that staying here wouldn't be so bad. At that moment, I felt like I was being hypnotized. I immediately snapped out of it. Then I began to rethink the events of the past 2 days in the base. The more I thought, the more chilled I became. I found Director Li, wanting to tell him the base was unusual and we should leave. But he was like he'd been brainwashed. He wouldn't leave no matter what I said. Right after I finished advising him, Yun arrived. He said he had business with me and told me to go with him. I kept my guard up. He talked to me a lot about the ideals of building this base, then told me to leave. After that, I didn't eat the divine fruit anymore. Every time I tried to find Director Li to convince them to leave, Yun would appear. Tan Shuang told Lin Shi everything. Did Yuni make tea for you then? Linshur asked. Yes, but I was very alert then. I didn't drink it. So you haven't eaten anything all day. Linshur saw that Tan Shuang's face was pale. She nodded. She looked at Linshur worriedly. Did you eat the divine fruit? Don't eat it. That fruit can affect your mind. Linshur blinked a few times. I ate it. One fruit. When I ate it earlier, I felt something was wrong. I even touched the tea I was so wary of from the start. Perhaps because his spiritual power was quite strong, he wasn't affected. Eating one divine fruit was indeed a risk. But he was a level 5 evolved human. Even if this divine tree was level 6, it couldn't possibly control him with just one fruit. If the divine tree were really that powerful, he could just lie down. Even resisting was a test. The process of affecting the mind surely took time. Others had eaten it for so long and were still fine, proving the fruit didn't act directly on the body. Then there was the scent in the air. Linshur had felt something was off from the start. Why hadn't he taken precautions? As a level 5 evolved human, he could hold his breath for half an hour, so he tried to do so, only taking one breath every 30 minutes. Under Tan Shuang's worried gaze, Linshur reassured her he was fine. All right, I understand. That old manly followed us after all. That really was beyond my expectations. Thinking of Li Xinka, a flash of insight crossed Linshur's mind. Yun-Yi discovered Tan Shuang's problem. Why did he let me take her away? Could their real purpose be to lure me and Tan Shuang away? No, maybe they just wanted to lure me. Linshur's face turned grim. He quickly said to Tan Shuang, wait for me here. I'm going back. Having said that, he kicked off the ground, a blur as he vanished. Linshur quickly ran several kilometers and summoned Ma Wang from his space. Ma Wang, hurry. Sensing the urgency in Linshur's voice, Ma Wang's eyes flashed red as it accelerated. When Linshur returned to the base, the gate was still tightly shut. Upon arriving, Ma Wang seemed to sense something, looking toward the divine tree on the peak with alertness. This time, Linshur didn't knock politely. Instead, he grabbed a tuft of fur on Ma Wang's neck. Ma Wang understood and leaped, easily clearing the wooden gate. The two middle-aged guards felt as if something had appeared over their heads, but when they looked up, they saw nothing. Meanwhile, Ma Wang had already brought Linshur to the residential area at the foot of the mountain. At that spot, Ma Wang had to slow down, causing the survivors who were already awake to scream in terror. Linshur couldn't care about that. If he wasn't mistaken, Yuni might have intentionally let him and Tan Shuang go. That was to act against the others. Ma Wang followed Linshur's instructions and quickly reached wooden house number 2323, where Linshur had knocked this morning. Linshur jumped off Ma Wang and abruptly pushed the door open. No one was inside. He quickly pushed open the 3 houses between number 2323 and Tan Shuang's room. No one there either. He and Tan Shuang had only left the base for a short while, yet so many people had vanished. If the people in the base weren't behind this, Linshur wouldn't believe it. If it were anyone else, Linshur might ignore it, but he had to bring that old manly back. He immediately jumped onto Ma Wang and pointed toward the peak. Go. Kill anyone who gets in the way. Hearing this, Ma Wang's eyes flashed red again. Its powerful aura terrified the patrol team running toward the base, and they didn't dare advance. By the time they recovered, Ma Wang had vanished. Backtracking to when Linshur had just returned, on the other side of the peak, under the divine tree, stood over a dozen people. Besides Yun-Yi and a masked man in black, there were Li Xinka, all the researchers, and the soldiers. Only Li Xinka and the researchers were now dazed, as if they'd lost their souls. Aren't you afraid of being retaliated against by the official organization for doing this? The man in black stared at the tangled roots of the divine tree beneath his feet. Humph. Humph. I remember you humans like to weigh pros and cons. Would they really come all this way to declare war on us for a few dead people? Even if they come, with me here, there's no need to fear them. The one who answered was Yun-Yi. Yun-Yi now looked completely different. His face was stiff, and his voice was strange, like a child learning to speak, with improper pronunciation. I admit you're special, but you can't leave this place. Immobility is your greatest weakness. No matter how many scientists you brainwash and how much smarter you become, you can't change that. Humans are a species of infinite potential. Who knows? One day someone stronger than you might appear. Then you'll be killed. The man in black's voice was hoarse, as if his vocal cords had been damaged. I want to be smarter. I want to know the origin of this world, the limits of evolution. With the top scientists from all over here, as long as I eat them, I can surely reach another level and control more people. As for being killed, Xie you're worrying too much. I can absorb energy from the air and soil to regenerate. Human attacks are nothing more than an itch to me. That human from before, I did feel a threat from him, but it was only a threat. I've created so many level 4 humans, including you and Yun-yi. He's just one person. If he doesn't behave, I can easily kill him. Yun-yi let out a KD smile. Xie said nothing more. He could barely save his own life. Why worry about anyone else? As soon as Lin Shi entered the base, Yun-yi's expression shifted slightly. So fast. These people, take them in. I want to begin. Hearing this, Xie went to the divine tree's roots and used his foot to clear the soil. Beneath the soil, a stone slab was revealed. Xie pushed it aside, revealing a pitch-black tunnel leading who knows where. Then, like driving cattle, Xie drove Li Xinke and the others into the tunnel. Then he went in too. Yun-yi closed the stone slab and covered it with soil as before. His face was stiff for a moment. Then he quickly regained his initial calm. Just as he finished, Lin Shi appeared under the divine tree on Ma Wang, flying straight toward Yun-yi. Yun-yi quickly backed away, staring at Lin Shi. I remember I told you, you're not allowed here. Lin Shi frowned. He had initially planned to seize Yun-yi immediately, but he hadn't expected him to dodge. You're actually level 4? It seems I still underestimated this tree. Yun-yi's dodging speed was that of a level 4 evolved human. Moreover, Yun-yi seemed to have known in advance that Lin Shi would attack. Where are those people? Lin Shi looked around, but didn't see Old Man Li and the others. What are you talking about? I don't understand, Yun-yi asked suspiciously. At this moment, the guards Ma Wang had knocked aside also caught up, but Lin Shi ignored them and looked at Yun-yi with eyes full of killing intent. If you don't want me to go on a rampage, then release those people. I really don't know what you're talking about. Yun-yi adjusted his glasses. He wanted to stall for time. But Lin Shi had run out of patience. Since arriving at this base, he'd always had an uneasy feeling, and his spiritual power was unusable. Seeing a mutated plant he couldn't even absorb. If this were really a mutated plant beneficial to humanity, fine. But clearly, this thing was a man-eater. He certainly wouldn't hold back. You're looking for death. Don't blame me. Lin Shi jumped off Ma Wang, headed toward Yun-yi, and said to Ma Wang, don't leave a single one alive. Ma Wang lunged like a wolf into a flock of sheep. Those level 3 evolved humans were as weak as lambs. In an instant, 2 of them were down. For the first time, a crack appeared in Yun-yi's calm face. He knew Lin Shi was strong, but where did this dog come from? Wait, we can talk. Yun-yi tried to stall for time, but Lin Shi didn't want to waste words. If Yun-yi wouldn't talk, he'd kill the divine tree before him, break this spiritual field, and then use his spiritual power to find Old Man Li and the others. Too late. Lin Shi threw a punch at Yun-yi. Yun-yi staggered to dodge. Although Lin Shi was much faster than Yun-yi, Yun-yi seemed to know Lin Shi was going to strike and dodged accordingly. Sure enough, this tree has spiritual power. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes after another punch was dodged by Yun-yi. It's no use anymore. Yun-yi's expression changed, becoming dazed. He said, Human, you've discovered me. Lin Shi immediately recognized the difference in Yun-yi. His voice and tone were both different. So it's the tree. Lin Shi was amazed. That's right. I don't have vocal cords like you humans, so I'm borrowing this body to speak with you. A plant, controlling a human? What do you want? Lin Shi attacked relentlessly, throwing another punch that forced Yun-yi to dodge hurriedly. Actually, at this moment, he was a bit spooked. He thought this mutated plant only affected human consciousness. He didn't expect it to be able to possess a human body like in those possession novels. So it's this tree. Lin Shi was shocked. That's right. I don't have vocal cords like you humans, so I'm borrowing this body to talk to you. A plant, controlling a human? What do you want? Lin Shi didn't stop his attacks, throwing another punch that forced Yun-yi to hastily dodge. In truth, he was feeling a bit of fear right now. He had thought this mutated plant could only affect human consciousness. He didn't expect it to be able to project its consciousness into a human body, just like possession in novels. I like raising them, just like how you humans like keeping pets. Yun Yi's words made Lin Shi pause for a moment. What? He had thought of many reasons, like raising them for food, or something else. Is it that strange? The strong decide the fate of the weak. Those pets that you humans take in, then abandon, or even kill. Isn't it because they aren't as strong as you humans, so they passively accept their fate? Lin Shi didn't argue with Yun Yi on this point. So you're a tier 6. You can possess human bodies, you can think, and you can control people? It's very simple. Because I am very strong. My ability is a type of mental influence. They absorb a lot of my scent, eat a lot of my fruit, and become dependent on me. Just like a baby animal nursing from its mother. I can actually control very few people. The conditions are very strict. I cannot control the strong or those with powerful spiritual energy. For example, you and that girl with special spiritual energy from before. Lin Shi immediately guessed that the divine tree was talking about Qin Shuang. Human, you are very strong. I want to be friends with you. Let's become stronger together in this world and uncover more secrets of life together. Yun Yi spoke with certainty. A tree wants to be friends with me? Lin Shi felt it was ironic. You've been targeting me from the start, haven't you? So you're just stalling for time. What are you doing with those researchers right now? The divine tree had said so much, but hadn't answered the key questions, clearly stalling for time. Human. The divine tree wanted to continue speaking through Yun Yi's body, but Lin Shi had already gotten many answers. Moreover, Manhwa's side had almost wiped out the guards. Right at that moment, a giant wheel axe suddenly appeared in Lin Shi's hand. Yun Yi thought he had dodged Lin Shi's attack, but he was still within the axe's striking range. With just a slight movement from Lin Shi, Yun Yi's head was instantly severed from his neck. The wound was incredibly smooth. The expression on Yun Yi's face was still blank, his mouth wide open as if he wanted to say something. Immediately after, Lin Shi raised the wheel axe and swung it down fiercely toward the trunk of the giant tree. Clang! The wheel axe bit deep into the trunk, about 0.3 meters deep. The entire trunk was roughly over 7 meters wide. With the width of the blade and the depth of this cut, it would take at least several dozen chops to cut the tree down. At this rate, he would only need 2 or 3 minutes to chop down the entire tree. But when Lin Shi pulled the axe out, preparing to strike again, in just a split second, the wound he had just chopped rapidly closed up. I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Seeing this, Lin Shi didn't hesitate to channel his origin energy into the wheel axe. The holes on the axe immediately shone brilliantly. Then he spoke, I won't chop you anymore. The giant tree didn't respond, and Lin Shi didn't expect it to. He only said that because channeling origin energy took a little time. Testing the giant tree's reaction. A few breaths later, the energy gathering was complete. A powerful slash, a flash of blue light, and he brought it down on the giant tree's trunk. The sharpness of the wheel axe allowed it to bite nearly 2 meters deep into the trunk. This slash caused the entire spiritual energy array of the base to shake violently, as if the giant tree was groaning. Lin Shi smiled in satisfaction. Just a few more chops, and he could cut down the giant tree. But would a tier 6 mutated plant that had developed spiritual energy be defeated so easily? The answer was no. Just as Lin Shi was about to pull the axe out, he found it was stuck. He couldn't pull it out. Lin Shi chuckled. With the immense weight of the giant tree, if it intentionally clamped down on the axe, Lin Shi's strength would truly have a hard time budging it. But did this tree really think that by trapping his weapon, it could stop him? Lin Shi let go of the axe in his hand, and another wheel axe appeared in his grasp. He gathered his energy again and chopped down on the trunk. His great killing weapon. How could Lin Shi not have prepared a few spares in his storage space? The giant tree was stunned, its spiritual energy fluctuating wildly. If the giant tree could still speak like Yun Yi right now, it would definitely be cursing. Initially, the giant tree's understanding of humans came entirely from the humans it had encountered. It had never seen a human who could conjure weapons out of thin air. Conjuring weapons was one thing, but why did the weapon have such massive destructive power? Massive destructive power was fine, but after it trapped one, this guy could conjure up another one. Is this what humans call having no martial ethics? Over a minute later, Lin Shi realized he had once again underestimated this divine tree. He had consumed over 15,000 points of origin energy in a short period. 5 giant axe blades were embedded in the tree trunk, forming a complete circle. Although it caused significant damage to the divine tree, all the axes remained stuck in the trunk, showing its determination to fight him to the death. Lin Shi knew he couldn't delay any longer. Li Xinke and the others were missing, and Li Xinke was incredibly important to humanity. Moreover, even though that old man had a sharp tongue, he was a good person at heart. Whether for public duty or personal reasons, Lin Shi had to save him. Originally, I didn't want to use this move. Lin Shi placed his hand on the tree trunk. The reason he didn't do this from the start was, first, the process of absorbing origin energy couldn't be interrupted. Second, this was likely a Tier 6 mutated plant. He wasn't sure if he would fall into a coma or suffer other side effects when absorbing it. In this place, falling into a coma would be extremely dangerous. As for using fire to burn it, first, the current temperature was several tens of degrees below zero. Outdoors, a fire would be hard to maintain. Second, how long would it take to completely burn down such a massive tree? Therefore, Lin Shi had never considered using fire. In the mutual restraint of the 5 elements, metal counters wood, and fire only restrains wood. But the strength of this tree far exceeded Lin Shi's imagination. In the end, he still had to use the cornucopia. When Lin Shi's hand touched the trunk, the cornucopia's notification popped up again. Massive amount of origin energy detected. Absorb. Wait. Stop. We surrender. A voice rang out, approaching from a distance. Lin Shi didn't recognize the person arriving, but Qin Shuang would definitely be very familiar with him. It was Kuang Yinian. Behind him were over a dozen altered humans holding weapons. While Lin Shi was fighting Yun Yi, the divine tree had been summoning others. Now, the divine tree had sensed the danger and was using Kuang Yinian's body to beg for mercy. Lin Shi looked at Kuang Yinian coldly, saying, "You surrender now? It's too late. A mutated plant this terrifying. If I don't kill it today, it will be a disaster. Manhwa, kill them all. Anyone who dares to approach, kill them." After saying that, the space trembled, and Lin Shi's army of origin beasts appeared beside him. Only by releasing his entire army of origin beasts could he guarantee absolute safety. As for those who witnessed this scene, they all had to die. Over 100 origin beasts almost completely occupied the mountain. Kuang Yinian, or rather, the divine tree, had never seen such a formation. Awu! Mang Wang gave the order, and over 100 origin beasts charged toward Kuang Yinian and the others. Lin Shi whispered in his heart, "Absorb." As soon as the thought ended, a familiar surge of origin energy flooded into his body. On the cornucopia's interface, the origin energy stat, which had been stuck at 100,000, began to fluctuate wildly. The characteristic of origin energy was that as long as one absorbed origin energy higher than their current tier, they could break through the origin energy limit of their current tier. At the same time, Lin Shi's personal stats skyrocketed. The origin energy in his body boiled, causing Lin Shi sharp pain. Simultaneously, the origin energy within the divine tree's trunk also fluctuated violently. "Stop! We surrender!" Kuang Yinian cried out in panic. Lin Shi remained indifferent. Before, it hadn't listened to reason. Now it wanted to apologize, but it was too late. Deep underground, suspended on the tangled tree roots, hung dozens of shriveled human corpses. These mummified corpses all shared one thing in common. Even though they were dried and stiff, the corners of their mouths still bore a bizarre smile. They died without knowing they were dead, still immersed in a beautiful dream. The corner of the cave was filled with countless other mummified corpses, piled up haphazardly. They were all victims of the divine tree. If the survivors in the base came here, they would see that these mummified corpses were all people who had once been very intelligent or perceptive. There were the elderly, young men, women, and even a child of about 4 years old. Xie Shan was bringing a researcher under the tree roots, then used the sharp tip of a root to pierce the person's head. The moment he was pierced, the researcher showed a look of agony. But when something from the root of the divine tree flowed into his body, his expression instantly became peaceful, followed by a bizarre smile. His body gradually withered, eventually turning into a mummified corpse with a grotesque smile. After finishing off one researcher, Xie Qingshan removed another mummified corpse from the roots, then replaced it with yet another researcher. Looking at his practiced movements, it seemed this wasn't his first time doing this. Beneath the black cloth, his face was terrifyingly calm, mixed with a deadened numbness. The base had 3 divine envoys, Yun Yi, Kuang Yinian, and Xie Qingshan. Unlike Yun Yi and Kuang Yinian, Xie Qingshan was not controlled by the divine tree. His consciousness was awake. The divine tree couldn't control him. Xie Qingshan was an amnesiac. He didn't know who he was, where he came from, or where he was going. He suffered from a strange illness and needed the divine tree's sap to survive. That was why the divine tree used him. At this moment, the hand of the pierced researcher suddenly jerked up, pulling off the black cloth on Xie Qingshan's face. A fire-scarred, ferocious, and horrifying face was revealed. Xie Qingshan hastily covered it back up with the black cloth and continued his work. Suddenly, a wave of spiritual energy transmitted over. Xie Qingshan's expression changed. He received an order from the divine tree, telling him to drop the person in his hands and go outside to help Kuang Yinian. Glancing at the remaining people, Xie Qingshan turned and walked away. Lin Shi was sweating profusely. The sweat froze into a layer of white ice due to the temperature being over -50 degrees. He looked like an ice statue. This time, he didn't fall into a coma. It seemed he would only fall into a coma when his spiritual energy underwent a drastic change. This time, he was only absorbing origin energy, so his mind wasn't affected. He breathed a sigh of relief. But right now, his bones and muscles were aching intensely, as if he was about to reach his limit. Lin Shi didn't know if he should actively stop the absorption. He opened his eyes to check the cornucopia's personal panel. The origin energy stat in his body had increased from 100,000 to 150,066. 611 and still counting. It's been about a year, and the people he brought are all dead. The divine tree's mental field is also dissipating. As if realizing its impending doom, the divine tree began to frantically influence the others. Halfway up the mountain, more and more survivors are running toward the peak, but Lin Shi remains indifferent. He didn't listen to advice before, and now it's too late to apologize. Lin Shi bit his lips slightly, absorbing endlessly. He didn't stop at all, continuously using his mental power to control the origin power, using it to heal his swelling arm. But the origin power pouring into his body from the divine tree was too much. His efforts were like trying to block a raging flood with a few sandbags. Right at that moment, a tiny shadow suddenly appeared above Lin Shi's head. It was the Pika Lin Shi had caught for experiments. The Pika climbed up the trunk of the divine tree, using its paws, feet, and teeth to dig into the bark. It seemed to want to dig a hole in the trunk. Lin Shi didn't quite understand. Did this little creature like digging holes in trees? Moreover, its digging speed was quite fast. In no time, it had dug a fairly deep hole in the trunk. However, perhaps because Lin Shi was absorbing the origin power too intensely, the dugout spot didn't quickly heal. On this side, Lin Shi was absorbing origin power. On the other side, Demon King and his subordinates were defending the perimeter. Just then, a large group of survivors also reached the mountain peak, a place they had never set foot in before. A middle-aged man led the way up. Seeing so many origin beasts at the peak, he trembled in fear. Immediately after, he saw Yun Yi's corpse and about 100 others lying on the ground. The middle-aged man cried out miserably, "Lord Yun Yi! Lord Yun Yi has been killed." Soon, more and more people arrived, all witnessing this hellish scene on earth. "He's destroying the divine tree." Someone pointed at Lin Shi, who was carefully protected by the origin beasts, his hand resting on the divine tree's trunk. "You despicable bastard! How dare you destroy the divine tree, our lifeline? Young man, stop right now. Are you trying to kill tens of thousands of us? Stop talking nonsense. Let's fight him to the death." These survivors viewed the divine tree as their saving god, and Yun Yi as the emissary sent to protect the tree and save them. Seeing Yun Yi dead, the survivors went completely mad. They didn't even think about why they had suddenly stepped into this forbidden area. They only knew that the one who killed Lord Yun Yi and destroyed the divine tree had to die. Lin Shi turned his head, looking at the survivors bewitched by the divine tree, knowing that explaining things to them was useless. Right now, the only way to wake them up was death. Demon King, whoever dares to step forward, bite their head off. Demon King stepped out, its overwhelming aura of a Tier 5 origin beast silencing the crowd. But just a moment later, a few survivors with glazed eyes continued to scream blankly. There are so many of us, let's charge. Are you afraid of these beasts? I must protect the divine tree. Kill all these beasts. Even if one dies, there are tens of thousands more. We absolutely cannot let the divine tree be harmed. Charge. Incited by those with ulterior motives, some hot-headed people rushed forward. Demon King showed no mercy. In the blink of an eye, over a dozen people at the front became headless corpses. Multiple headless corpses sprayed blood and collapsed, stunning the agitated survivors. But immediately, someone in the crowd continued to incite them. If the divine tree dies, we'll have no food. We'll starve to death. We're dead either way. Might as well risk our lives for the divine tree. Avenge Lord Yuni. Right at this moment, Lin Shi's voice suddenly rang out, Hua Hua. Hearing Lin Shi's call, Hua Hua immediately understood. She unleashed a mental shockwave into the crowd. A series of miserable screams echoed as rows of people collapsed. This move was unexpectedly effective. Lin Shi quickly ordered, keep going. Hua Hua continuously unleashed mental shockwaves. The crowd fell like dominoes, one by one. When Hua Hua got tired, Ji took over. But the enemies were too numerous. Even though hundreds or thousands had fallen, tens of thousands more were still charging from behind. Many were trampled. However, the death rate of the remaining survivors was significantly slowed down by Hua Hua and Ji taking turns attacking with mental shockwaves. These people were only under the long-term influence of the divine tree's fruit. They weren't beyond saving. As long as this bizarre mutated plant was destroyed, they would recover. At this moment, the origin points on Lin Shi's personal interface had reached a terrifying number of over 180,000 points. He sensed that the divine tree was nearing exhaustion. But right then, a noise suddenly came from the lower left of where Lin Shi was standing. Startled, Lin Shi immediately swept his mental power underground. He saw Li Xinke and the others. 3 scientists had been sucked dry into mummies, and hundreds of other mummies were frozen stiff in the deep cave. Xie Qingshan pushed aside the camouflaged stick above and crawled out of the tunnel. Xie Qingshan's eyes met Lin Shi's. He was slightly stunned. Lin Shi also frowned, looking at Xie Qingshan. For some reason, he found this person's eyes familiar. But that didn't affect Lin Shi's kill order. This was the divine tree's killer, definitely the one controlling it. Kill him. Seeing Xie Qingshan suddenly appear, Xiaobai immediately rushed forward to block Lin Shi. The other origin beasts lunged at Xie Qingshan. Unexpectedly, Xie Qingshan jumped back into the cave. He dodged all the origin beasts' attacks. Then, instead of running away, Xie Qingshan poked his head out to look at Lin Shi, his eyes full of confusion. Do I know you? Lin Shi glanced at the skin that didn't look like a face under Xie Qingshan's black cloth blindfold. He frowned and replied, I don't recognize you. Lin Shi noticed something unusual. This person had his own consciousness. Oh, never mind then, Xie Qingshan said, then froze. He looked around, saw the corpses of Yuan Yi and the others, and then pulled his head back into the cave. He retreated into the cave. Don't go in. Lin Shi stopped Xiaobai, who was about to rush into the cave. That guy just now is a Tier 4 evolver. The cave is narrow. Origin beasts will have a hard time moving, and are prone to counterattacks. Seeing Xie Qingshan dig another tunnel from inside the cave, slipping past Lin Shi and the origin beasts on the surface to escape, Lin Shi told Xiaobai and Tyrant, wait at the mountainside. When he comes out, capture him alive. Before he could think much, Lin Shi let out a cry of pain. He gritted his teeth. The origin power in his body had reached saturation. His whole body ached and felt tight, like a balloon about to burst. Right now, the origin power in my body has reached a staggering 200,000 points. A quantitative change leads to a qualitative change. I feel like I'm going to explode, like a balloon about to pop. Suddenly, it stopped. Instantly, all the origin power in his body surged toward his left hand, which was pressed tightly against the divine tree. The change was too fast. Lin Shi still didn't understand what was happening. Right then, the treasure basin, which hadn't responded for a long time, suddenly displayed a new notification. Host's origin power detected at maximum threshold. Acquired Tier 6 ability, plant growth acceleration. What? Lin Shi's eyes widened in shock. Before he could comprehend what these 4 words meant, the last trace of origin power flowed into his palm. The divine tree shook violently, as if letting out a helpless roar. This Tier 6 mutated plant was finally drained of all its origin power by Lin Shi. At the same time, the divine tree's mental fluctuations completely vanished. Having finished absorbing the origin power, Lin Shi withdrew his left hand, looking at his unchanged palm. In his mind, only those 4 words echoed: plant growth acceleration. Did I understand its meaning correctly? Tier 6 means I've evolved a new ability. Because I absorbed too much origin power, I gained this ability earlier than expected. Plant growth acceleration. If my guess is right, this is absolutely an ability humans shouldn't possess. Now is not the time to test it. Lin Shi had to suppress his curiosity and excitement. He turned to look out over the mountain peak. On the ground, over 100 people were dead, and thousands more had fallen into a coma after being hit by Hua Hua and Ji's mental attacks. On the mountain peak, besides Lin Shi, no one was left standing. But near the peak, on the mountainside, and even across the entire mountain, it was packed with people. People kept pushing toward the peak. The number of people trampled to death was even higher than those killed by Lin Shi's origin beasts. When the divine tree died, these people seemed to lose their purpose, or perhaps they broke free from some kind of influence. Those who hadn't reached the peak, still on the mountainside or at the foot of the mountain, had no idea what was happening. They were confused, wondering why they were there. Ugh, what am I doing? Why did I come up to the peak without permission? I've trespassed into the forbidden area. Lord Yun, he won't forgive me. Oh my God, look at the divine tree. What's wrong with the divine tree? Someone looked up. A cold wind blew past, and the leaves carrying the divine tree's life force fell like rain. The falling leaves were thicker than a snowstorm. Even a blind person could tell the abnormal change in the divine tree. When the divine tree didn't have a single leaf left, all the survivors felt a sense of unease. The divine tree. The divine tree has withered. Is the divine tree dead? Then what about our food now? It's over. The divine tree is dead. The monsters outside will rush in and eat us. The survivors panicked. Cries, groans, and desperate pleas for help echoed endlessly. If their previous captive life felt tolerable, then starting today, the real apocalypse had just begun for them. Taking advantage of the fact that the people on the peak hadn't woken up yet, Lin Shi stored all the origin beasts, except Demon King, into his spatial dimension. He didn't even spare the corpses of Yun Yi and the others. Xiaobai and Tyrant, who were chasing Xie Shan, had already run out of the base. Lin Shi was also preparing to give chase. Right then, Lin Shi suddenly felt like something dropped on him. Looking up, he saw the Pika still diligently digging a hole in the divine tree's trunk. Lin Shi chuckled softly. With a thought, he stored the Pika into his dimension. Following the hole the Pika had dug, he looked inside and gasped. In the middle of the withered divine tree's trunk, a streak of green appeared. Could it be the divine tree isn't dead? After thinking for a moment, Lin Shi pulled out his large axe and swung it hard near the base of the tree. Without the support of origin power, the spot where he could previously only chop a tiny bit was now easily cleaved open by Lin Shi, leaving a huge, deep gash. Lin Shi swung the large axe, quickly chopping over a dozen times, severing it. The entire trunk of the divine tree. Before the divine tree could fall, Lin Shi had a thought and stored it into his dimension. The divine tree suddenly vanished, causing chaos among the people at the foot of the mountain. But Lin Shi had already stored his axe before the others rushed to the peak, then turned and mounted Demon King, turning into a blur as he left from the other side of the mountain. When the survivors climbed to the peak, they only saw people lying on the ground. The place where the divine tree once stood tall was now just an empty stump. Lin Shi was already gone. Losing the divine tree's mental control, Li Xianke and the others also snapped out of their daze. They ordered the soldiers to carry the bodies of the 3 dead scientists down the mountain. As soon as they reached the bottom, Li Xianke was surrounded by furious survivors. The soldiers hastily explained that they didn't destroy the divine tree, but were instead bewitched by it and almost eaten. Then they led everyone underground, showing them the dried corpses drained of life by the divine tree. At this point, some of the smarter survivors finally understood. It turned out the divine tree wasn't a divine tree at all, but a demonic tree. Providing them with food was just a way to slowly eat them, especially those whose family members had been taken away by Yun. They had thought their loved ones were taken to be secretly trained as successors, never expecting them to be eaten by the divine tree. The collapse of their faith caused a portion of the people to nearly break down. As for some of the foolish ones, out of a base of tens of thousands, the divine tree had only sucked dry a few hundred. It might not have even been their turn. They could have survived by relying on the divine tree. They viciously cursed the one who destroyed it. As for Li Xinka and the others, their faces were full of bitterness. They originally came here to collect samples of the divine tree for research, never expecting this thing to be a trap, costing the lives of 2 scientists and one of his students. Now, they could only collect some of the divine tree's roots and soil to take back. Among everyone, there was only one survivor who was the most clear-headed. That was little brother Zhou, the one who had previously led Lin Shi into the base. Little brother Zhou's eyes had never been as bright as they were now. He whispered in a voice only he could hear. "It's him. Brother, thank you. I can finally leave this place." Elsewhere, Lin Shi rode Demon King, quickly chasing in the direction Xie Qingshan had fled, with Xiao Bai and Tyrant pursuing from 3 directions to surround him. Finally, after half an hour, they cornered Xie Qingshan in a canyon. "I'm dying anyway. Why must you hunt me down to the bitter end?" Blocked, Xie Qingshan didn't resist, just plopping down on the ground. "What do you mean? Who exactly are you?" Previously, the divine tree could control even ordinary people, but it couldn't control this tier 4 powerhouse to attack him. The only possibility was that the divine tree couldn't control this person. But this man in black was under the divine tree helping it kill people. To say he had nothing to do with the divine tree was impossible. Lin Shi looked down at the man in black. The ruined face looked more and more like someone he had met. Looking at the exposed eyes of the man in black, Lin Shi's mind automatically compared them to the cynical eyes in his memory. "My name is Xie Qingshan," Xie Qingshan said lazily, sprawling on the snow-covered ground. "If you want to kill me, just do it. You killed the divine tree. Without the divine tree providing sap, I won't live much longer anyway." Seeing Xie Qingshan's lazy demeanor, Lin Shi felt he resembled the person in his memory even more. He probed, "Qi Yun. What Qi Yun? Don't you recognize me?" Xie Qingshan tore off the mask on his face. A hideous, fire-scarred face was revealed. Lin Shi fell silent. With this appearance, even his own mother would have a hard time recognizing him. "Tell me, how did you get in here?" Lin Shi asked. Seeing that he was about to die anyway, Xie Qingshan answered truthfully. "About 2 months ago, I woke up under the divine tree. I don't remember who I am or where I came from. Yun said I was found in Guyun City, half dead at the time. The divine tree used its sap to save me. They told me to join this base, but I don't like being controlled. They couldn't catch me either. A few days later, something like a toxic rash appeared on my body. It was excruciatingly painful. The divine tree used its sap to save me again. Since then, I had to drink the divine tree's sap every few days to survive. And the price I had to pay for drinking that sap was serving that stump. I saw the name Xie Qingshan on a piece of paper in my pocket. I thought it was my name. So do you know me?" After recounting everything about himself, Xie Qingshan sat up, looking at Lin Shi with expectant eyes. But just a second later, he lay back down. All right, I'm dying anyway. What does it matter who I am? If you want to kill me, hurry up. Make it quick, okay? Thanks, brother." Lin Shi frowned. The timeline matched when Qi Yun disappeared. But Qi Yun was tier 3 when he went missing, and this person calling himself Xie Qingshan was tier 4. Was he already this strong when he appeared at the base? Lin Shi asked. Xie Qingshan answered immediately. "That's right. I was already this strong when I woke up. That stump couldn't control me, so it wanted to use me. That stump is terrifying. It can transfer its power into others in a short time, making them stronger. It originally wanted to do that to me, but I refused. This made it harder to tell." Lin Shi couldn't be sure this person was Qi Yun, because Qi Yun had just broken through to Tier 3 not long ago. How could he have quickly broken through to Tier 4? Relying on a sense of familiarity and impression, he had met Qi Yun less than 10 times. He couldn't confirm it based on that. If he wanted to identify Qi Yun, he had to find someone who knew Qi Yun. And currently, only one person met that condition, Qi Yi. The last time Lin Shi saw Qi Yi was at the shelter. Qi Yi said he was going to find Qi Yun. He had to see the person alive, or the corpse if dead. In front of him was a man in black, lying motionless. Lin Shi reached out and lightly tapped his forehead. He found his feelings toward Qi Yun quite complicated. Initially, it was hostility. After hearing the news of Qi Yun's death, there was a bit of regret. Furthermore, Qi Yun disappearing before finding him to tell him everything, and knowing that he and Qi Yun shared a bloodline, made Lin Shi's feelings even more tangled. So, how should I deal with this person? Finally, Lin Shi said to Xie Qingshan, "Follow me. I'll get someone to treat you, and see if we can restore your memory. You're not going to kill me?" Xie Qingshan sat up, looking at Lin Shi in surprise. Lin Shi looked at Xie Qingshan. His eyes were clear, but unfortunately, his face was too ugly. He averted his gaze. Ultimately, Lin Shi decided to ask Qin Shuang to take this person back to Sha City to see if he could be cured. This was all he could do for Qi Yun. Lin Shi told Xie Qingshan to wait back at the base, while he went to find Qin Shuang. She was probably waiting for him in Guiyun City. Finding Qin Shuang, Lin Shi briefly recounted what happened over the past half-day, asking her to go back and reassure Old Man Li, then return to Sha City, taking Xie Qingshan along. As for meeting him in Sha City, there was no need to mention it for now. Even though someone would eventually find out he destroyed the divine tree, he wanted to delay it as long as possible. Qin Shuang wouldn't leak a word, then hurried back to the base. At this time, the base was in chaos. The evolvers Tier 2 and above in the village had previously followed Yun Yi up the mountain. Now, only some Tier 1 evolvers and ordinary people remained. After discovering the divine tree was destroyed, all sorts of ugly human nature gradually revealed themselves. Neighbors who used to live in harmony were now red-faced fighting over a divine tree fruit. On the other hand, because the divine tree no longer controlled people's minds, the divine tree fruit naturally became the most delicious thing. People who had been calling each other brothers for months were now spilling blood over a weapon. Some thought that since they would die if they went outside anyway, they might as well enjoy their final days. They broke into the homes of neighbors they had coveted for a long time, killing the men and raping the women. Some of the smarter ones had already fled the base. But how could those used to living in comfort adapt to the cruelty of the apocalypse? The once peaceful scene was now like a soap bubble, bursting to reveal painful, rotting wounds. As for Li Xinke, he was waiting in a room near the mountain peak. Besides the 3 unlucky researchers, the other soldiers were safe and sound. Since retrieving their weapons from Yun Yi's residence at the peak, they had been guarding Li Xinke. Many survivors wanted to plot against them, but were killed on the spot by the soldiers. The number of remaining researchers dropped from 4 to 1. If Li Xinke made a mistake, these people would be executed. Qin Shuang returned to the base, witnessing a hellish scene. Corpses were everywhere, a brutal sight. A blind man, seeing the young and beautiful Qin Shuang, felt lust rising. Qin Shuang snapped his neck. She picked up a short sword for self-defense, turned on her camouflage, and quickly found the location of Li Xinke and the others. Seeing the 3 scientists sucked dry, everyone's expressions changed. Qin Shuang looked at Li Xinke, who was sitting with his head bowed in silence. "Director, let me escort you out of here first." Li Xinke stood up, his already aged face looking even more haggard. He sighed, "It's all my fault. My stubbornness killed my students." "Director, even if you didn't come, the leader would have sent someone else. No one wanted to see this happen." Qin Shuang comforted him. Li Xinke said nothing, but looked toward the remaining soldiers. "You guys guard outside. I want to speak with little Qin alone." The soldiers nodded and left the room, leaving only Qin Shuang and Li Xinke. The atmosphere grew quiet. Outside, miserable screams and ear-piercing shrieks still echoed, creating a stark contrast with the quiet space inside the room. Qin Shuang took the initiative to speak. "Director, what did you want to talk to me about? Right now, we need to leave here quickly. This place will soon become a living hell." They still have origin beasts outside the base, along with the 4 soldiers guarding them. As long as we find the origin beasts, we can leave immediately, Li Xinke said. Little Qin, do you know who chopped down the tree that saved us? Qin Shuang shook her head slightly, calmly replying, I don't know. I went out for a bit today and failed to protect you, Director. I will accept my punishment. Li Xinke looked at Qin Shuang with sharp eyes. No need for punishment. This morning, I heard a student say an old friend of Tianrui came looking for you. You went with him, didn't you? Seeing Li Xinke's all-knowing gaze, Qin Shuang knew she couldn't hide it anymore. Lin Shi told her to keep it a secret, yet the secret was already out. Qin Shuang clenched her fists, a murderous glint flashing in her eyes. She didn't admit it. You must have misheard. That was an old friend of mine. After the apocalypse, somehow he wandered here and came to talk to me. If she killed this old man, and then the soldiers outside, Lin Shi's secret would be safe. Qin Shuang thought to herself. Li Xinke nodded. From the moment he saw the marks on the divine tree, he had guessed it. Such a massive cut. And that giant broad axe. What else in this world was that big and powerful? Appearing so coincidentally, and that massive divine tree disappearing in such a short time. Where did it go? Lin Shi hid many secrets. Li Xinke felt that even pretending not to know was no longer possible. Tell him to be a bit more careful. Li Xinke didn't explicitly say who, but both understood who he meant. He then instructed Qin Shuang. From now on, don't mention this to anyone. If anyone asks how the divine tree disappeared, just tell them what you just told me. Don't mention Tianrui's old friend either. Just say you saw someone suspicious this morning and chased after them to investigate. Pausing for a moment, Li Xinke added, don't mention that kid Tianrui's name anymore. Li Xinke genuinely liked Lin Shi and wanted to protect him. An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. If Lin Shi's secrets were discovered by many, it would cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. Li Xinke constantly reminding Qin Shuang to hide, it wasn't without reason. Lin Shi was too strong, developed too fast, and was too ruthless. If Lin Tianrui knew Lin Shi's secrets, it would spark ambition in some people. At that time, the shelter would definitely be destroyed by those ambitions. It would be a disaster, not a blessing. It had to be said, although Li Xinke usually seemed careless on the outside, what citizen of the Xia kingdom didn't understand the ways of the world? Let alone him. It was just that most of the time, he wanted to focus on research, so he pretended to be naive. Great wisdom often appears as foolishness. Truly great wisdom appearing as foolishness. Qin Shuang nodded slightly, relaxing her clenched fists. She actually respected Li Xinke a bit. Fortunately, the two had reached an understanding. It had to be said, Lin Shi still felt he was alone, but there were actually many people who genuinely cared about him. This was also related to Lin Shi's personality. Although Lin Shi always appeared decisive and incredibly cold on the outside, he still retained a soft spot and a bottom line in his heart. Unbeknownst to him, his existence had helped and influenced many people. It was just that Lin Shi himself didn't know it. The sharp-eyed and quick-handed evolvers. Qin Shuang and Li Xinke spoke in very low voices. After reaching an agreement, the two left the room, preparing to leave this blood-soaked base. As for the survivors, they could have organized and taken a group with potential back to Sha City. But because Li Xinke was in the team, he was too important, and they lacked manpower, so they could only take Li Xinke back first, then notify Lin Tianrui to send people later. Before leaving, Qin Shuang also brought along Xie Qingshan, as Lin Shi had instructed. Not long after the group left the base, they unexpectedly ran into the escort team Lin Tianrui had sent for Li Xinke. This team was led by Chen Xiang, along with over 30 Tier 2 evolvers. After joining forces, the team immediately grew stronger. Li Xinke suddenly said there were tens of thousands of people in the base, telling a portion of them to go take in the survivors. Therefore, the dozen or so people who had previously escorted him to the base were left behind. Since Li Xinke had spoken, no one objected, not even thinking there was any hidden meaning. Only Qin Shuang lowered her eyes, a strange glint flashing in them. Those who stayed behind would likely face danger when the survivors rioted. And if these people died, Lin Shi's secret would only be known to her and Li Xinke. At this moment, Qin Shuang realized another thing. In the apocalypse, never underestimate anyone, especially the elderly. As the group left the base and entered Guyun City, Qin Shuang suddenly felt her chest grow heavy. A small creature had jumped into her chest at some point, scaring her into a cold sweat. But seeing this small creature tied with a cloth the same color as Lin Shi's clothes, Qin Shuang calmed down. The small creature rubbed against Qin Shuang's chest and spat out a small bottle, which Qin Shuang caught. After spitting out two things, Qin Shuang's chest felt lighter. The small creature had disappeared. In her chest was only a bottle of green liquid and a piece of paper, proving Qin Shuang wasn't hallucinating. Qin Shuang took a deep breath, fell back to the rear of the group, and took out the paper to read. Written on the paper was, "For Xie. Thanks." 3 puzzling words, accompanied by a letter. But Qin Shuang knew this was left for her by Lin Shi. Thanks meant thanking Xie Qingshan. Previously, Lin Shi had informed Qin Shuang that Xie Qingshan was poisoned, telling them to go back and see if they could detoxify him. Besides Lin Shi, no one could control origin beasts like that. Moreover, it was an origin beast that could evade the senses of a Tier 3 evolver. Qin Shuang glanced at Xie Qingshan, who looked quite indifferent in the group, preparing to find an opportunity to give him the medicine bottle. Lin Shi stood on the roof of the tallest building in Guyun City, watching Qin Shuang's group gradually walk away. A moment later, a tiny black shadow ran over. Squeak. Master, I've completed the mission. It was Ji, a Tier 4 origin beast with a tiny body but powerful mental power, capable of evading the senses of a Tier 3 evolver. Lin Shi sent it to deliver the items. The item given to Qin Shuang was none other than the liquid Lin Shi extracted from the divine tree's core. After parting ways with Qin Shuang, Lin Shi found a place to chop up the divine tree. The divine tree's core was withered but still retained its green color. Inside was a large block of wood the size of a water bucket, filled with green liquid. This liquid carried a strong life force, emitting a pleasant fragrance that made Lin Shi feel refreshed. He tested it and found that drinking this liquid could enhance mental power. So he quickly extracted the liquid, getting a total of 23 test tubes. Thinking that this thing didn't contain origin power, Lin Shi took a risk and duplicated another batch. The duplicates seemed to be of lower quality. The taste was similar, and it still felt refreshing to drink, but it didn't enhance mental power. Lin Shi had hypothesized this before, and the result was not unexpected. Lin Shi had Ji bring a bottle of the duplicated product to Xie Qingshan. This liquid from the divine tree's core had powerful detoxifying properties, definitely better than the kind the divine tree previously gave Xie Qingshan to drink. This was also completely different from normal blood or heart blood. Whether Xie Qingshan was Qi Yun or not, Lin Shi doing this much was because Qi Yun had sent Qi Yi to the shelter to pass a message to him back then. As for what happened to Xie Qingshan after this, it was no longer his concern. Lin Shi didn't waste the remaining parts of the divine tree either, chopping them into wooden blocks and storing them in his dimension. The divine tree's wood was very fire-resistant, much better than ordinary firewood. He patted Ji's head, rewarding it with a leftover ginseng root from before, then stored it in his dimension. After that, he and Demon King had to return to the base. Just now, the gibbon had finished its evolution. He wanted to return to the deep mountain base to see if there were other mutated plants, and to check the missing divine tree trunk to see if it would grow back. That divine tree was too dangerous. If left to grow, who knew what it would become in the future? Only by uprooting it completely and exterminating it could Lin Shi feel at ease. He didn't dig it up earlier because there were too many people at the base. Returning now, probably no one would care about that useless divine tree stump anymore. Lin Shi rode Demon King straight back to the base. The thick stench of fresh blood wafted from the base, which Lin Shi smelled from afar. Entering the base, the scene before him was completely different from its former prosperity. The survivors were either dead or had fled. Only a few survivors remained in the base, but almost all of them seemed to have gone mad. Lin Shi didn't know what mood he should use to face this scene, a scene that could be said to have been created by him. He destroyed the divine tree, also destroying the utopian paradise of these lucky survivors. But Lin Shi didn't regret it. If he didn't destroy this terrifying, mutated plant, waiting until it absorbed enough origin power and humans to grow stronger, the whole world would become a nightmare. In just about a year, It was already able to deceive Li Xianke and the others from over 1,000 kilometers away. If the divine tree continued to develop and evolve, controlling even more people, what would happen to this land? From the beginning, the existence of this base was a mistake. As soon as he entered the base, the crazed survivors rushed at him, wanting to fight to the death. Demon King grabbed one person in a single swipe. Lin Shi rode Demon King, dodging these people, and quickly dashed to the mountain peak, arriving before the divine tree's stump. There wasn't a single soul on the peak. With a thought, he released the gibbon, along with the expert digger Clouded Leopard, the digging specialist Ji, and the two newly trained comrades, Tyrant and Xiaobai. Lin Shi even released the Pika that specialized in finding tree cores. They dug up all the roots. The excavation work began. What followed was a massive project that took a lot of time. Lin Shi didn't expect the divine tree's root system to be so developed. Not only did it burrow deep into this mountain, but it also spread out for hundreds of meters. Therefore, he personally joined the digging. Because the root system was too developed, he could only dig up a portion, cut it off, and store it in his dimension. If he wanted to dig up the entire root system, he would probably have to collapse the whole mountain. Digging deeper, Lin Shi finally understood why this tree evolved so quickly to Tier 6. It turned out there used to be many plants in this mountain. Just the amount of plants sucked dry by the divine tree was a massive number. He even found a particularly large bush that had likely mutated. All the essence of those plants had been absorbed by the divine tree. After a day and a night, Lin Shi finally emerged from underground. Some roots were too small, so Lin Shi directly stored the soil and rocks into his dimension, nearly causing the entire mountain to collapse. Fortunately, only a part of the peak collapsed. As a result, 99.99% of the divine tree had been removed by Lin Shi. To remove it completely, unless he stored the entire mountain into his dimension, this was the best he could do for now. The origin beasts were all exhausted too. If the divine tree could still resurrect, then Lin Shi would be out of options. Wiping the dirt off his body, Lin Shi found an empty room in the base to sleep for the night. The gibbon and the other beasts were all tired, so they didn't look for places to dig holes to stay in anymore. After a day and a night, the number of people in the base had decreased even more, but there were still some lucky survivors. Lin Shi let Demon King guard the door, then closed his eyes to rest. Early the next morning, after a night's rest, his stamina had recovered. Lin Shi rode Demon King, along with the gibbon and the Pika, and began exploring the mountains and forests of Yun Province, searching for mutated plants. It wasn't until half a month later that Lin Shi finished exploring the entirety of Yun Province and collected 2 types of edible mutated plants. Currently, Lin Shi was waiting in a desolate area, having prepared a safe shelter. In front of him lay 3 types of mutated plants with different shapes. Yun Province had many mutated plants. Over the past 14 days, Lin Shi had found 7 different types of mutated plants. 4 types contained deadly poison, enough for the gibbon to eat. Currently, in front of Lin Shi were 3 types of mutated plants. 2 were edible, and 1, Lin Shi wasn't sure if it could be eaten. It was a type of mushroom, the green-handed bolete, a mushroom that Yun Province used to love. Lin Shi didn't understand how this mushroom survived in these freezing conditions. But the apocalypse started around June or July, right when Yun Province had a lot of rain and mushrooms grew abundantly. During the outbreak of origin matter, it wasn't strange for a type of mushroom to survive. A normal green-handed bolete could be eaten as long as it was cooked thoroughly. But for a mutated green-handed bolete, he wasn't so sure. He used a dagger to cut a small piece off the mutated green-handed bolete. The wound immediately turned from pale yellow to green, then purple, and finally dark green. Its toxicity was clearly not low. Setting the green-handed bolete aside, Lin Shi picked up another mutated plant. He didn't know what it was, but the gibbon confirmed it wasn't poisonous. It was found by the Pika. This made Lin Shi very happy. Not because of an extra mutated plant, but because of an extra mutated plant hunter. Lin Shi finally found information about this Pika in the data he had downloaded earlier. It turned out this was a small animal that specialized in eating herbs. Before the apocalypse, it was an endangered species. Who knows how it wandered to Sha City and almost became his lab rat. Ahem, not almost, it was already experimented on. Because he couldn't determine its effects, only knowing it wasn't poisonous, Lin Shi tried taking a leaf and chewing it. First came the origin power. After eating it, he felt a bit cool, with no discomfort. This was also a type of herb, one that clears heat and detoxifies. It didn't enhance mental power. Lin Shi put it down. His origin power had stopped at 200,000. Eating it would just be a waste. Next was the second type. He also took a leaf. As soon as he put it in his mouth, Lin Shi frowned. It had some origin power, didn't enhance mental power, and was very bitter. Putting it down again, Lin Shi planned to plant these two mutated plants. As for the green-handed bolete, he'd cook it later to see if the poison could be neutralized first. He didn't want to end up bedridden. Lin Shi went down to the basement. The basement had the mutated plant that grew fruits which enhanced mental power. Since running out of gene potion, Lin Shi hadn't fed it any more gene potion. Therefore, this plant grew very slowly, until Lin Shi gained the ability to accelerate plant growth. Over the past 14 days, he had basically mastered the plant growth acceleration ability. He placed his left hand on the plant, channeling origin power into his left hand, converting it into a strange life energy. Following Lin Shi's left hand into this green mutated plant. Over the past 14 days, thanks to Lin Shi's plant growth acceleration ability, this mutated plant had produced a yellow-green fruit. On another branch, there was also a flower bud. As energy from Lin Shi's hand continued to pour in, the entire mutated plant seemed to be put on fast forward, changing rapidly. In just a few breaths, the green fruit became plumper. The pale yellow bud quickly grew, bloomed, then withered, forming a small green fruit, which then rapidly grew. On other branches, new buds were also blooming. Lin Shi pursed his lips, continuously pouring origin power into his left hand, until the green fruit completely turned yellow. Then he withdrew his hand. The origin power in his body was depleted by 1/20th, which was 10,000 points. Recovering this amount of origin power took a lot of time. For example, every day he used 10,000 points of origin power for this plant growth acceleration ability. The amount of origin power Lin Shi absorbed every day was only enough to offset the consumption of maintaining his Tier 5 genes. Therefore, this 10,000 points of origin power was almost impossible to recover in a short time, unless he used something else to boost his origin power. The gene potion he currently had on hand wasn't much, and he had no supply source. It was only to be used in emergencies. After 14 days of continuous use, plus the small amount used in previous experiments, Lin Shi's origin power was down to less than 70,000. This was after he had eaten quite a few origin beasts to replenish his origin power. After his mental power reached Tier 6, he decided to rest for a while, recover his origin power, and then continue his journey. He plucked the ripe, golden fruit, casually wiped it on his shirt, and took a few bites. His mental power increased by 200 points. Over the past 14 days, Lin Shi had repeated this process many times. Using this plant growth acceleration ability once a day, it took about 2 days to produce a golden fruit. Lin Shi's mental power had increased from over 2,400 points to 4,788 points. The credit went to the Divine Tree's essence. That Divine Tree essence could greatly enhance mental power. Drinking too much at once would cause a coma. But drinking a small amount was just right. He planted the 2 mutated plants that couldn't enhance mental power into the small garden he had prepared in the basement. He took out the last bottle of Divine Tree essence. There was 1 mouthful left. Lin Shi drank it all, and his mental power increased by another 280 points. He was only 184 points away from unlocking Tier 6 genes. He just needed to accelerate the growth of 1 more golden fruit, and it would be enough. Applying today's principle, Lin Shi used the plant growth acceleration ability again. 2 uses consumed 20,000 points of origin power. The green mutated plant finally produced a golden fruit. Taking the fruit down, Lin Shi left the basement. He didn't know what complications would arise from advancing from Tier 5 to Tier 6. Before eating this fruit, he needed to prepare. Going to a safe place outside the room, Lin Shi used his mind to release Demon King and Xiaobai. The entirety of Yun Province had already been cleared of all origin beasts by him once. Plus, the people of Yun Province who previously gathered in Guyun City had dispersed, so it was quite safe. But Lin Shi wasn't sure how long he would be in a coma, so he had to be prepared. Through this period of observation, Lin Shi confirmed that Xiao Bai was the vice commander of the Origin Beast Legion. Tyrant was sometimes too playful, so he'd just let it be a fun pet. I'm going to evolve. I'm not sure if the evolution process will put me in a coma. If it does, I don't know how long I'll be out, so I'll have to rely on you guys this time. Lin Shi spoke to Demon King and Xiao Bai. Lin Shi handed over a few things to note to Demon King and Xiao Bai. First, store enough food for a month in the living creature dimension. Next, since he was releasing Demon King outside to guard, Lin Shi also had to prepare food for it. Otherwise, Demon King would starve to death or have to leave the area to hunt. Thinking carefully, Lin Shi also released Xiao Hui to keep Demon King company, along with 3 Tier 3 Origin Beasts. This way, Demon King would have time to rest and handle unexpected situations. Xiao Hui and those beasts could also hunt on their own. After finishing the preparations, Lin Shi returned to the safe room, locked the door carefully, and lay down on the sofa. Taking out a golden fruit, he took a bite. Because of the familiar feeling, his mental power surged to 5,016 points in an instant. But immediately, a wave of unconsciousness hit him. Unsurprisingly, Lin Shi passed out again. After he fell into a coma, the origin power in his body automatically circulated, converging toward his right hand. An unknown amount of time later, Lin Shi woke up in the dark. This sleep felt very long. He subconsciously released his mental power outward. The scene at the snowy entrance was chaotic, blood splattered everywhere, and fierce beast footprints covered the ground. Demon King and 2 giant Tier 3 wolves were in a standoff with a pack of Origin Beasts. Although the numbers were vastly different, the opposing side didn't dare to attack easily. Xiao Hui, injured at some unknown point, lay behind Demon King, its hind leg bleeding profusely. 1 giant Tier 3 wolf was missing. In front of Demon King, dozens of Origin Beasts were currently prowling. Leading them was a Tier 5 clouded leopard, not the clouded leopard in his dimension, but a wild one. Facing a Tier 5 Origin Beast and a pack of dozens of other Origin Beasts, although Demon King still looked majestic, through its sluggish eyes, Lin Shi realized it was already exhausted. The Tier 5 clouded leopard let out a low growl. Dozens of Tier 2, Tier 3, and even a Tier 4 Origin Beast behind it lunged to attack Demon King. Demon King immediately bit the neck of a Tier 3 Origin Beast, then swatted away the Tier 4 Origin Beast trying to sneak attack. These wild Origin Beasts, facing Demon King's power, were like meeting their natural enemy. They were slaughtered by Demon King until they had no strength to fight back. On the surface, Demon King still dominated the opponents despite being outnumbered, but in reality, looking at its sluggish eyes, one could tell it was utterly exhausted. Right at this moment, the Tier 5 clouded leopard standing in place suddenly vanished and appeared beside Demon King. Taking advantage of Demon King's lack of defense, it bit its hind leg. But Demon King had experienced countless battles under Lin Shi's training. How could it be easily injured by such a sneak attack? It raised its hind leg and kicked the Tier 5 clouded leopard hard in the face. The kicked Tier 5 clouded leopard let out a miserable cry. Seeing it couldn't gain the upper hand, the Tier 5 clouded leopard immediately retreated, causing the other Origin Beasts to stop attacking. After leaving behind 6 Origin Beast corpses, the pack retreated behind the Tier 5 clouded leopard. But they didn't leave, maintaining a certain distance, staring intently at Demon King. Lin Shi immediately realized that this pack of Origin Beasts intended to use this tactic to exhaust Demon King to death. Although Demon King looked fierce on the outside, it was actually exhausted. Just looking at the 2 Tier 3 wolves beside it, their limbs already limp, he knew right away. During the time he was in a coma, Demon King and the others had engaged in fierce battles with this pack of Origin Beasts many times. Lin Shi stood up, intending to go outside. But just a second later, he felt dizzy and his vision blurred. He collapsed back onto the sofa. When he woke up, he only observed the situation outside, not having time to pay attention to himself. Checking his body, he immediately cried out in shock. Lin Shi discovered he was skin and bones, his whole body devoid of strength. The origin power in his body was depleted. He hadn't felt cold in a long time, but now he couldn't help but shiver. How long have I been in a coma? His voice was hoarse, like the sound of dry branches rubbing together. In this situation, Lin Shi immediately understood. He must have been in a coma for a very long time. An evolver has a large amount of origin power in their body. If they don't replenish energy for a long time, it will consume origin power. Once the origin power is gone, it starts consuming physical stamina. Last time he was in a coma for a week, he only felt hungry and thirsty, not to this extent. This time, the coma definitely lasted longer, at least twice as long. Lin Shi checked the situation of the origin beasts in his dimension. There was still some food left, managed by Xiao Bai. He had prepared enough for a month. That meant he had been in a coma for almost a month. Without hesitation, Lin Shi stored Xiao Hui, the heavily injured dog, into his dimension. Seeing Xiao Hui disappear behind it, Demon King's eyes lit up. It immediately barked loudly. Woof! Woof! Master is back. After that, Lin Shi ordered Xiao Bai, the clouded leopard, the gibbon, and the other beasts in the dimension, then used his mind to bring them outside. The Tier 5 clouded leopard was originally staring intently at Demon King, preparing to attack, intending to grind them to death. Suddenly, it was surrounded by an origin beast army appearing from the dimension. Before it could react, Hua Hua and Ji appeared from the dimension, unleashing a mental attack. The origin beasts that dared to take advantage of their weakness to bully the boss were beaten left and right. Next, following Xiao Bai's command, the beasts charged in to attack. The battle outside had become completely one-sided. Lin Shi didn't need to worry. What he needed to care about most right now was his own body. Lin Shi used his mind to take out the leftover ginseng root from his dimension, trembling as he brought it to his mouth, chewing and swallowing it bit by bit. His body warmed up a little from the origin power and life force of the ginseng. Then, regardless of whether it was a waste or not, he consumed over 1,000 gene potions at once, replenishing about 10,000 points of origin power. Lin Shi felt his body get a bit stronger, at least not as powerless as before. Then he propped himself up, turned on the light switch, and went to the kitchen to stew a pot of beast meat broth. For a mutated human. A normal person who has been starving for a long time can't eat meat right away, but Lin Shi wasn't a normal person. His digestive ability was already incredibly strong. Evolution didn't just bring power, but comprehensively enhanced his body. Lin Shi drank a mouthful of meat broth, feeling his stomach warm up, definitely without any discomfort. He lifted the entire pot of stewed meat broth and drank it all. He didn't even care about the heat. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Lin Shi cooked a large pot of meat broth, ate all the beast meat and ginseng in it, feeling like he had been resurrected. He also finally felt the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Earlier, when he first woke up, Lin Shi didn't feel hungry at all. That was a state of being overly starved. He took out the pre-prepared roasted meat from his dimension, sat down at the dining table, and ate his fill. Once he started eating, he couldn't stop. It wasn't until his stomach felt tight and full that he licked his lips and stopped. Throughout the meal, Lin Shi kept an eye on the situation of Demon King and the other beasts outside. At this time, the battle was coming to an end. The Tier 5 clouded leopard, which initially relied on its large numbers, was now the only one left commanding. The other origin beasts had been completely wiped out by the suddenly appearing origin beast army. That Tier 5 clouded leopard was also covered in injuries. If it weren't for Demon King looking too exhausted, it would have been taken down long ago. However, under the coordination of Demon King, the clouded leopard, the macaque, Xiao Bai, and Tyrant, that Tier 5 clouded leopard quickly lost its life. Especially the clouded leopard, Lin Shi's Tier 4 clouded leopard, attacked extremely fiercely, seemingly trying to show Lin Shi that its strength was no less than that Tier 5 clouded leopard. Lin Shi cleaned up a bit and left the safe room. Seeing Lin Shi, all the origin beasts were almost simultaneously stunned. The clouded leopard took 2 steps forward, looking at him with disbelief. It sniffed, seemingly confirming if this skinny, skeleton-like person was its usually majestic master. Demon King was still the quickest to react. Smelling Lin Shi's familiar scent, it immediately rushed over to hug him. Only this time, it caused both Lin Shi and Demon King to fall into the snow. Demon King quickly stood up. Lin Shi smiled wryly and got up. Although his body had been replenished with some origin power and food, it still needed time to fully recover. It's been hard on you guys. With a bowl full of greasy broth, Lin Shi's voice was much more normal. He looked at the beasts with an affirming gaze. First, he patted Demon King's head, then patted Xiaobai. After getting intimate with the origin beasts, dispelling the feeling of distance from the past month, he finally said, "Go back." With just a thought, he recalled the origin beasts into his dimension, leaving only the Clouded Leopard and Demon King. The Clouded Leopard flatteringly stuck out its tongue, acting like, "Master, seeing my achievements, you will put me to good use. Go back and rest well." Lin Shi patted Demon King again. "As for this Clouded Leopard, you can eat it in the dimension." The Clouded Leopard trembled slightly, then immediately understood Lin Shi was talking about that Tier 5 Clouded Leopard. It let out a huge sigh of relief. Right after eating, Lin Shi opened the treasure basin's personal interface and confirmed his current Tier 6. He had reached Tier 6. Demon King, as his important companion, also needed to catch up. After recalling the bodies of Demon King and the other origin beasts, Lin Shi turned to the Clouded Leopard and said, "Clean up the bloodstains on the ground. Guard this place well." The Clouded Leopard nodded silently. Waiting for Lin Shi to re-enter the safe room, it smugly licked the fresh blood of the Tier 5 Clouded Leopard left on the snow. Lin Shi returned to the safe room and opened his personal interface again. Player information: Lin Shi, 20 years old, muscular. Evolution level: Tier 6 gene lock. Internal origin power: 200,000 units. Mental power: 5,016. Telekinesis. Ability: plant growth acceleration, object control. Object control. Lin Shi's eyes lit up, full of excitement. Did he understand object control? Previously, to activate the plant growth acceleration ability, he had to use his left hand. His right hand was completely powerless. But what about this time? Lin Shi tried raising his right hand. When origin power surged into his right hand, all the unfixed objects in the living room floated up, hovering in midair. Wasn't this telekinesis? Lin Shi was overly excited, causing the flow of origin power to be interrupted. The hovering objects immediately fell to the ground, making loud clattering noises. Failure. Lin Shi wanted to try again, but with just that small test, he had consumed 10,000 units of origin power, an amount he had painstakingly accumulated from gene potions. Clearly, the urgent task now was to recover his origin power before testing this new ability. Lin Shi cleaned up the living room, then practiced the vitality art, a footwork technique he hadn't practiced in a long time. This footwork helped accelerate the absorption of origin matter in the air. Because he had the treasure basin to help absorb origin power, he rarely practiced the vitality art normally. Only when waking up early in the morning would he practice a few moves to warm up his muscles and bones. With just one set of the vitality art, his internal origin power increased by a few hundred units, and his body heated up. The higher the tier, the greater the amount of origin power converted from one set of the vitality art. After that, Lin Shi rested for 7 days. During those 7 days, besides eating origin beast meat, he only practiced the vitality art. The origin power in his body had recovered by about 50,000 units. Over the past few days, Lin Shi discovered a characteristic of Tier 6. Compared to Tier 5, Tier 6 consumed less daily origin power, but the speed of absorbing origin matter in the air was higher. In other words, even if he didn't do anything, the origin power in his body would slowly recover. It was no longer like before, where absorption and consumption were almost equal. The Tier 5 Clouded Leopard had been eaten by Demon King. Although eating a Tier 5 origin beast helped Lin Shi recover his origin power a bit faster, it still wasn't as good as feeding it to Demon King. After knowing that Tier 6 would evolve an additional ability, Lin Shi understood that the leap from Tier 5 to Tier 6 was a crucial boundary. He could use the treasure basin to absorb origin power and use the vitality art to accelerate the absorption of origin matter. But origin beasts, besides accumulating over time, could only evolve by eating their own kind, especially those of the same or higher tier. Only then would their evolution speed be faster. Feeling the minor origin power fluctuations on Demon King, he believed that Demon King would soon evolve. The next time it evolved, Demon King would definitely bring him a surprise. After 7 days of eating and sleeping well, Lin Shi's physical condition was much better than when he first woke up. His strength and speed had recovered to the normal level of a Tier 5. He was only a little bit away from reaching the peak state of Tier 6. His figure was still skinny, and it would probably take more time to fully recover to how he was before. But Lin Shi didn't plan to stay here anymore. He prepared to set off, recovering his origin power on the way while practicing his new object control ability and heading towards his next destination. He heard there were many origin beasts in Chuan province. He would stop by there to replenish his origin beast meat stash and develop a large-scale origin beast pack. After that, he would continue to Yu province to search for mutated plants. Tier 6 was still not the peak of evolution. Lin Shi's goal was to reach the highest tier his ancestors of the Lin family had ever reached, Tier 7. Lin Shi stepped 1 foot onto a snowboard, speeding across the flat ground. That's right, on flat ground. Today was his first day setting foot in Chuan province. Lin Shi was already able to use his object control ability to maneuver the snowboard. Since acquiring this ability, he had used it 3 times and had grasped some rules. When using the object control ability, he could remotely control an object with a maximum weight equal to his one-handed lifting strength. It could be one object or multiple objects, but the total weight couldn't exceed his maximum one-handed lifting strength. Changing the direction and speed of the object depended on his mental power control. In short, this was a dual control ability, utilizing both mental power and origin power. The first time he used this ability, Lin Shi hadn't mastered it and accidentally used too much origin power. Actually, this ability didn't consume much origin power inherently. The level of consumption depended on the total weight of the objects and the intensity of the manipulation. For example, right now, Lin Shi was controlling the snowboard. The snowboard was very light. He easily controlled its movement without spending much origin power. The amount of origin power he absorbed was enough to offset the consumption. But if it were a large number of objects or heavier ones, it would consume more origin power. And to make an object reach a speed sufficient to fight a powerhouse of the same tier, it would consume a lot of mental power.